Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of What If Neglected Naruto Became a Spider Summoner. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 17. Rebirth of a Legend. Hotel Room. Tanzuka Gai, Tsunade's POV. Tsunade slowly awoke in the hotel room she had Shizune rent the morning after her confrontation with Menma. Despite being drunk, she remembered the entire fight and had never been so humiliated in her life. That brat had not only copied her technique but also defeated her and treated her like trash. She was ticked, and now that she was sober she was preparing to beat that kid into the ground. Before she could get up to hunt the brat, Jiraiya entered the room. She scowled at her former teammate. "What do you want? Here to ridicule me for being defeated by a kid?" Jiraiya shook his head. "No, I'm here to explain why Menma acted like he did last night." Tsunade raised an eyebrow but did not interrupt as Jiraiya continued. "Menma was abandoned at a very early age. Since I respect his privacy, I won't tell you who abandoned him. However, from what I have been able to discover is that he trained himself from the ground up for years to surpass his former family. One of the main studies he practiced in was medical ninjutsu." Tsunade felt a bit shocked. The brat that had been able to teach her was almost fully self-trained. She knew that self-training was incredibly dangerous. Without anyone to teach you correctly, one may learn incorrectly and make a critical mistake in the field. But to be able to learn medical ninjutsu without a teacher, arguably the hardest of all the fields to learn besides fuinjutsu. The kid was a genius or an incredibly hard worker. Jiraiya continued. "He idolized your legend when he was younger. You had lost so much but continued to be strong. You were extremely strong in the fields that he wished to succeed in. But I guess when he met you, drunk and angry at the world, he snapped." Tsunade looked down in contemplation and Jiraiya was about to leave the room when he turned around slightly. "I do not know what Orochimaru offered you to heal his arms. But..." The Toad Sannin unleashed a large amount of killing intent into the room as he stared at Tsunade. "I will kill you." Tsunade glared but did nothing. There was a reason that Jiraiya was known as the strongest Sannin. He had long surpassed the medic, especially after her lack of training in these recent years. A few minutes later, after Jiraiya left, she jumped out the window of her hotel room, following the chakra of Menma. Soon she found him standing beside a cliff training. He was punching the cliff repeatedly with his super strength, causing massive craters in the earth. Menma stopped punching one more time, obliterating a boulder before turning around to face Tsunade, his face blank. "What do you want, Tsunade-san?" Tsunade glared at the kid in front of her but did not attack. "I want to know how you learned medical ninjutsu by yourself." Menma looked a bit confused but responded. "I mostly snuck into the hospital and stole training manuals and looked at books in the library." Tsunade nodded and couldn't help but remember her early childhood when her parents refused to teach her medical ninjutsu, insisting she be a ninjutsu specialist like her grandparents and parents. She had herself stolen medical texts and studied on her own until she was a genin, and it was too late for her parents to force her to change. She threw a scroll to a confused Menma. She began to walk away and explained, "Master the technique in a week and I'll return to Konoha to heal your friends and the Hokage." Menma POV. Menma was confused. Tsunade had changed her mind pretty fast. He opened the scroll and his eyes widened. It was Tsunade's personal notes on perfecting her super strength. He had only mastered it in his arms because the hands and arms were the easiest points in the body to expel chakra. Tsunade had it at such an art she could enforce and use her super strength with any piece of her body. It was renowned as one of the most difficult chakra control exercises in the world, if not the most difficult. The only reported chakra control exercise more difficult was the first Raikage's lightning body technique. He read the entire scroll and closed it and looked at his hand and clenched it, and a blue glow surrounded it and eventually his whole body. Tsunade said he had a week to complete this jutsu. He would do it in 3 days. 1 week later, Menma had completed the technique in 4 days and spent the other 3 refining the technique. It was mid-afternoon when he was about to leave to find Tsunade when he had to jump out of the way as a large man crashed where he once was. He flipped away and landed on a boulder and inspected his attacker. He was a very large man with bulging muscles. He had long scraggly black hair and only wore a simple tunic and shorts. Menma glared at the man and prepared his chakra scalpels. Who are you, and what do you want? The man grinned savagely. I have no name. I am Experiment 6730. I have been ordered by Orochimaru to bring you in. I also have orders to take as much revenge as I want on you for killing Experiment 6729. Menma got into his fighting stance, lifting his palm forward with his other hand clutched in a fist by his side as he spread his legs. I am guessing this 6729 is the man I faced in the Konoha invasion. He used steroids to augment his speed, while this guy must augment his strength judging by the crater where he jumped down. The man smirked and roared as a red aura seemed to envelop him and the earth beneath him shattered, kicking up a dust cloud in the air. Menma stared at the man wide eyes. This is inhuman. Even with steroids he shouldn't be able to have such strength. The dust cleared a bit and the man rushed forward with a red aura surrounding him. Menma barely was able to dodge a punch that shattered the boulder he had been training on for over an hour. I see, that red aura seems to be similar to Inari's chakra. Orochimaru must have gathered some of the Kyuubi's chakra and implanted it into this man along with the steroids, massively increasing his strength. The man roared again and charged the Chunin wildly, arms spread out in case the spider summoner tried to dodge to the sides. Menma waited for the man to get close before disappearing and drop-kicking the man into the earth, shattering it and kicking up another dust cloud. He jumped away on the top of a large boulder and continued to analyze his opponent who was getting up slowly. I infused that kick with the amount of chakra necessary to shatter a boulder. His augmentations must have increased his defenses as well. He paused to observe the man looking around blindly in a rage. The Kyuubi's chakra is greatly increasing his rage by the second. He is more beast than man now. I will need some serious piercing power to penetrate his defenses. Time to use one of the moves that I learned over this past week. Menma gathered chakra into his palm and sped forward, a blue aura surrounding his palm and fist as he pushed chakra through his legs to increase his speed. My poisons will be effective against him, so I will have to go with brute force. While the experiment turned around only to get a palm thrust at his gut, causing a massive air wave behind the man before blasting him away into the side of the cliff. Menma thought of his technique that he learned. By using my medical knowledge I know where to strike to send the vibrations of my palm thrust into the body, damaging the internal organs similar to the Hyuga. Add in Tsunade's super strength and you turn those vibrations into sound waves, rupturing the internal organs. The dust from the palm thrust cleared to show the man slowly standing up, the red aura around him growing stronger. Menma stared at the still standing member wide-eyed. What the hell? I completely obliterated his internal organs. Even Shio does not heal this fast. He must have been further experimented upon to heal this fast. The battle was interrupted by three large animals appearing in the distance and Menma glanced at them. Those are the three great summons of Konoha. It seems Orochimaru is fighting Tsunade and Jiraiya, or Tsunade allied herself with Orochimaru against Jiraiya. Either way I need to finish this quickly. However, when he looked at his opponent again he was blasted away by a punch to the gut. He coughed out a little blood and went hurtling back into a boulder and nearly passed out from the blunt force trauma. He gasped a little for air as he felt his stomach. Thank God I wrapped some dungeon spider silk around my midsection or I would have broken every bone in my chest area. Quickly using the healing palm jutsu and some of his regenerative toxins he stored within his blood, he jumped away from another attack by the experiment. Menma landed in the shadow of a boulder and thought carefully. I have to be careful. One hit to any other part of my body which is unarmored by spider silk will be my end. I have to hit an area that cannot be regenerated before he dies, which is traditionally the heart or brain, but I cannot be sure he won't heal from that. Oh well, I will have to improvise. The man seemed to be frothing at the mouth as he grew angrier. Damn you, just die already. The madman threw back his head and screamed as three tomo appeared on his forehead and his entire body turned purple and his eyes glowed white. Menma stared at the transformation wide-eyed. This must be cursed seal level 2. I read about it in Orochimaru's notes, but seeing it in person is incredible. His power has increased by a factor of 2. I will need to end this quickly. His power seems to be scaling along with his rage, so therefore I have to use it against him. The now purple man roared in rage and charged at him. Thankfully with his muscle mass he had begun to slow down and that left Menma with an opening. Menma pulled a bunch of chakra in his arm and charged at the madman, yelling his attack name pointlessly. Point jab. Heart. He had learned this trick by copying Tsunade's one-finger bit. By compressing all the chakra he could muster in his fingers, it would gain tremendous piercing power. The second Raikage was famous for this technique with lightning chakra. The two opposing forces slammed into each other and Menma's hand went straight through Orochimaru's experiment's heart, completely obliterating it. Knowing that this may not be enough to end him, he then channeled his toxins into his enemy's body, poison release, Doku Kansen. His arm turned sickly purple and the organs inside of his opponent's body were all infected and diseased. He pulled his hand out of his opponent with a sickening sound and fell backwards holding his side painfully. That last collision had dislocated his arm and maybe broken the femur in his leg. Holding his hand to his leg, he lighted up his hand with a healing jutsu and healed most of the damage, then proceeded to reinsert his arm with a wince. That was always unpleasant. He sealed his opponent in a scroll to examine later. Perhaps he could discover a way to remove the curse seal now that he had a person afflicted with it. He jumped away to the site where the summoned animals recently disappeared. Clearing near Tanzuka-gai. Menma entered the clearing to see Tsunade announcing that she would return to Konoha and proceed to beat the shit out of Orochimaru. He stood wide-eyed as the infamous snake Sanin got his ass handed to him via punching. He looked around the field to see Jiraiya on the large toad, Gamabunta he believed, and Shizune kneeling next to an unconscious Shio. He rushed over to help heal his sister. Menma turned to Shizune while healing some of Shio's injuries. What happened? I was delayed by one of Orochimaru's henchmen. Shizune glanced up and returned to her task while speaking. Tsunade came by herself to deal with Orochimaru. However, she was discovered and Kabuto, who was over there wounded, used her fear of blood to take her out. Shio came along with Jiraiya. Shio defeated Kabuto but was wounded in the process. Jiraiya fought with Orochimaru along with Tsunade, who came out of her fear of blood and defeated Orochimaru's summoned snake, Manda. Menma nodded at this information and glanced at Orochimaru, who disappeared along with his subordinate. He lowered his hands and cancelled his jutsu. Shio was healed enough for her natural regenerative abilities to do the work. He walked up to Tsunade and clicked the ground with his heel, causing it to shake a little. I win the bet. Tsunade smirked at him and took off her necklace and placed it around Menma's neck. I doubted you there for a few minutes there, Gaki, when I didn't see you first thing this morning, but since your sister already convinced me to return, I'll give you that necklace as payment. Menma's eyes widened as he saw the necklace. It was the first Hokage's necklace. It was priceless. He was about to protest when Tsunade kissed him on the forehead. Don't bother arguing, kid. You really impressed me with your skills. Come talk to me if you want some tips on medical ninjutsu. Menma stuttered a bit in the presence of his idol and nodded, blushing a bit. Jiraiya laughed. Well, Gaki, looks like you impressed Tsunade here. Tsunade growled and punched Jiraiya. Shut up, pervert. Jiraiya cried a bit at the hit before turning to Menma. I assume Orochimaru sent one of his henchmen to you. He bragged that you were going to die to his experiment in the fight. Menma nodded. Yes, the experiment was very powerful. It seemed that Orochimaru pumped a man full of steroids, gave him a curse seal level 2, and injected him with some of the Kyuubi's chakra. He was more beast than man and grew stronger as his rage increased. Jiraiya nodded before he looked at Menma confused. Cursed seal level 2. I thought the cursed seal only has one stage. Menma cursed his slip a bit. I studied the seal on Anko's shoulder for a while and it seems that there is a hidden level of power of the seal. Once the recipient has submitted to Orochimaru's will, the level will unlock and give the user more power, while simultaneously gaining more loyalty for Orochimaru. Jiraiya nodded. We need to report this to the Hokage and start healing the wounded immediately. Let's go. Everyone except the still unconscious Shio nodded and Jiraiya hoisted the girl onto his back and they all disappeared. 3 days later, Konoha, Minato's office. Minato rubbed his forehead as he read the mission report. Why couldn't there be one normal mission for Menma or Shio? Why? It gave him so much paperwork, which was even harder with one hand. Minato sighed and put down the document. I am increasing the importance of this mission to S rank due to the confrontation with S-ranked mission ninjas. You all will be paid appropriately. The Hokage sighed heavily. I can't believe you ran into Orochimaru, Itachi, and Kisame Hoshigaki. Minato seemed to contemplate something a bit when Shio spoke up. To-san, who were those men in the black cloaks? Jiraiya refused to tell me. Minato looked wearily at his daughter and began to explain. The Akatsuki is a newly formed group of S-ranked criminals. Their main motives are unclear, but their main objective seems to be the capture of the Jinchuriki. This includes Shio. Shio gasped a bit and Menma narrowed his eyes in contemplation. Minato continued. I wanted you and Menma to go on this mission to try and avoid the eye of the Akatsuki for a while. It seemed I was wrong and they still managed to track you down. Minato stood up. I will follow with you Tsunade to the hospital to extract the poison and reattach my arm. The others still need your healing as well. Tsunade nodded in affirmation. Konoha Hospital. Kakashi's room. Tsunade stood by Kakashi's bed with her hand glowing a light green over the Cyclops' forehead. Eventually Kakashi opened his non-Sharingan eye and blinked a bit. Tsunade told the Jonin to get some rest and Minato said he would be by later to fill him in on the situation. Konoha Hospital. Sasuke's room. Tsunade once again held her glowing palm over Sasuke's forehead. Unlike Kakashi, however, the minute Sasuke opened his eyes he shot up in bead and clutched his head. Shio Tackle hugged the Uchiha. Sasuke. I was really worried about you. What were you thinking charging two S-ranked ninjas by yourself? If it wasn't for Menma chasing them off, I don't know what they may have done. Sasuke's eyes seemed to twitch a bit at his teammates' cheerfulness and twitched harder at hearing that Menma forced his brother to retreat, while he could not even touch his brother. Menma sighed at Shio's tactlessness and turned to Tsunade. There's one more patient I hope you can look at after you heal the Hokage. Tsunade nodded. Lee's hospital room. Tsunade stood before the shirtless Lee and whistled at the amount of damage. You really went through the grinder, kid. The operation will be very difficult. About a 50% chance of death or full recovery. Lee's eyes widened at this information. He looked down a bit and put his shirt back on. Can you give me time to go over it? Tsunade nodded with a sympathy in her eyes. All right, kid, I have to go heal the Hokage now. You should take a couple of days to go over the treatment. Lee nodded, eyes downcast, and left the room before Menma could say anything. Menma looked sadly at the retreating back of his teammate, Lee. One day later, Hokage Monument. Menma walked up the steps to the Hokage Monument and saw the back of Lee standing on the fourth Hokage's head looking at the sunset. He smiled a bit at the familiar scene and called out, I thought I would find you here. Lee looked around startled. Oh, Menma, I did not see you approach. Menma stood alongside Lee and stared at the sunset. Menma focused his thoughts on what he wanted to tell his teammate. He looked down and frowned. He barely knew his own path through life. What was he supposed to tell someone who was at a crossroads? One path led to a bright shinobi future while the other led to death. While the final option led to a life full of regret and longing. He had been inspired by Tsunade finding her path again and felt he was closer to his answer. He decided to say what he felt in his heart. Lee, take the treatment. Lee widened his eyes and stared at his teammate. Menma continued. I know you. Maybe not as much as Guy or Yakumo, but I know you. You don't quit and never look back and question your choices. You train harder than anyone in Konoha. Your will to live is so strong that the treatment will be a 100% success rate, not 50%. You won't die because you have a standing beside you, hoping you will live. Lee was speechless and looked over his teammate's shoulder to see Anko-sensei, Yakumo, and Guy standing there smiling encouragingly. He blinked and the apparitions disappeared and he cried a bit and nodded resolutely. I will take the treatment. I want to live, but I want to live for my dreams, not an empty life. Menma nodded and smiled one of his few rare smiles. You can do it, Lee. Lee nodded, smiling determinedly. 3 days later, Konoha Hospital. Menma was standing in the waiting room of the hospital, tense, alongside Yakumo, Guy, and Anko. They were all waiting for the results of the operation. Guy was praying to every deity he knew. Yakumo was biting her nails while Anko chewed on the same dango stick that she had eaten 3 hours ago. Suddenly the light flashed from red to green on the emergency room and everyone looked up and Tsunade walked out, exhausted but smiling. He will be fine. Everyone outside the hospital thought that a bomb had gone off from the cheering. Chapter 18. End of the Halcyon Days. Konoha, 1 week after Lee's surgery. After the success of Lee's operation, Team 9 and Guy held a large party for Lee the moment he woke up. It was there that they discovered never to let Lee drink sake again. Ever. Flashback. They were celebrating at a sushi bar when Lee mistakenly grabbed Anko's sake instead of his water and took a sip. The Lancer look-alike suddenly froze and a blush grew on his face and it seemed like a whirlwind struck the restaurant. When Menma woke up he was buried slightly in rubble and rubbed his eyes in astonishment to see Lee passed out with 5 Jonin ninja around him, each knocked out. End flashback. Menma shivered at the memory. Lee and sake did not mix at all. He was walking away from Lee's room when he heard a smash in the room he was passing and opened the door to see his sister's teammate Sasuke and the Haruno girl. On the floor was a broken plate with cut apples scattered around it. He sighed a bit. He did not want to get caught up in this drama. He looked between the two genin and finally spoke, "Whatever is going on here, I don't want any part of it." He prepared to leave but Sasuke spoke first. "Shio said that you forced Itachi to retreat, is this true?" Menma once again cursed his sister's loose mouth and spoke, "I made him retreat because he was in a bad position due to allowing me to prepare and underestimating us. In a straight fight I would lose." Sasuke glared and activated his Sharingan, which now had 2 tomo in both eyes. "I want you to fight me." Menma stared at the Avenger in front of him and recognized the look in his eyes. He once had the same look every time he thought of his former family. He knew he owed it to his past self to try and help Sasuke in front of him. He nodded and both made their way to the roof, Sasuke never noticing he stepped on Sakura's carefully cut apples as he walked away. Sakura stared mournfully at the back of her crush as he walked away. She had learned much from her time with Kurenai. She was going to be her official apprentice when she made Chunin due to her talents with illusions. She had already learned enough to be considered a high genin by the time Kurenai had broken her from her fangirl tendencies. When she had heard that Sasuke was injured she knew she had to see him one more time clearly without the rose-tinted glasses she used to wear with him. This last act of his had proven Kurenai right, that Sasuke was not worthy of her affections and that she should move on. Once again she sighed and looked at the crushed apples, feeling her dreams of being with Sasuke represented perfectly by the mashed fruit. Hospital rooftop. Menma stood across from Sasuke and spoke, "No serious ninjutsu, this is a hospital and I don't want to hurt anyone inside. Keep it to minor or non-destructive ninjutsu and taijutsu." Sasuke nodded and took out his tanto and shunshined behind Menma preparing to attack him from behind when the blade was blocked by Menma's glowing hand and the black-haired Uchiha was forced to bend backwards to avoid being backhanded by Menma. Sasuke stood up on a handstand and would have kicked Menma in the chin had he not leaned back and kicked the Uchiha in the back away from him. Sasuke grunted at the force of the kick and ran through some hand signs and expelled a large fireball at the spider summoner. Menma knew that Sasuke wanted him to jump over the fireball and attack him in the air but he wouldn't give him the chance. He used his hair to form a dome around him. Sasuke saw the smoke erupt and jumped into the air to try and defeat Menma but was confused when he didn't see him anywhere. He began to think he had hit Menma with his fireball when black wires wrapped around him and formed a cocoon. The arrogant Uchiha scowled as Menma was revealed from his hair shield, completely unharmed from the fireball. Sasuke expelled fire chakra around him and burned the threads away from him and summoned fire around his tanto and swung it many times, unleashing the flames at the spider summoner. Menma responded to the slashes of flame by activating his chakra scalpel and swinging his hands down and called out, "Chakra scythes." By applying the same technique as Tsunade's super strength, he could release the chakra scalpel in his hand to make a scythe-like blade that would fly at his enemies. Sasuke jumped out of the way of the attack but was not prepared for Menma's hair to suddenly fire Senbon-like needles at him. The Uchiha quickly replaced himself with a very convenient log that was perfectly cut without a forest for miles. Menma sighed as Sasuke pressed a kunai knife to his throat. "You are still naive, Sasuke." Sasuke widened his eyes as he detected with his Sharingan a buildup of chakra in the clone. The clone lifted up one hand in a half-ram sign and said calmly, "Doku Kage Bushin Debuhaka asterisk." The clone exploded in a large cloud of purple smoke that covered the roof of the hospital until it dispersed into a scroll by Menma. The spider summoner looked around the rooftop for the elusive Uchiha. Sasuke burst from the ground below him, his hand crackling with fire as it pierced straight through Menma. However, the Menma that the Uchiha had stabbed ended up melting into purple sludge. Sasuke was careful to make sure none of it touched him as he jumped away. He glanced around until he spotted Menma sitting on the upper portion of the roof. He growled and was about to engage again when Menma spoke. "You fell into my trap, Sasuke." Menma pulled a wire next to him, and the next second Sasuke was bound in metal wire that had been layered all around him throughout the course of the fight. Sasuke growled but knew he was defeated. He could not channel fire chakra to burn away this wire because it would superheat and fuse to his skin. Menma walked up to the bound genin. "You lose, Sasuke." He started to walk away but stopped at the door of the roof. "We used to have the same eyes, you know. I held the desire for revenge so strong I would do anything to achieve it." He paused, thinking of his next words. "You need to decide whether or not your desire is for justice or vengeance. A person who seeks justice will have a fulfilled life and be able to work with his allies to defeat the person who wronged him. A person who seeks vengeance will allow it to eat at the person until they are nothing more but an empty shell, or a rabid dog. At the end of the day, the only thing you have left is your dignity, Sasuke. When you look your brother in the eye the next time you see him, do you want to have the same eyes as him? So full of anger and sadness at the world that you no longer cared if it burned around you. Make sure you walk your own path in life, Sasuke. Because that will be the ultimate revenge against your brother." He released the Uchiha from his threads and left the hospital, hoping his words would prevent Sasuke from going down the road he had almost followed. He walked down the street but stopped when Anko appeared next to him. "Get your gear, Gaki. Tsunade wants us for a simple C-ranked mission." Menma nodded and left for his apartment. Hokage's office. Minato sat before the uninjured members of Team 9 Inches. Team 9, I need you to take this scroll to one of the outposts near the border of Mizu. I do not expect any complications. If there is, I am making you do the paperwork to whatever unnatural event occurred. The 3 members of the team sweat-dropped. Mizu border outpost. It had taken the members of Team 9 an entire week to travel all the way to the outpost to deliver the scroll. Menma was a bit conflicted. On one hand, there was no horrible event that occurred during their mission. However, he could not shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Konoha. Sasuke was standing on a rooftop thinking about his fight with Menma. It angered him to no end that a no-name orphan could so easily defeat him. He felt like such a failure. He could not get Rookie of the Year unlike his brother. He could not pass the Chunin exams the first time unlike his brother. He could not even put up a decent fight when he saw his brother for the first time in 8 years. However, he could not help but think back to Menma's words, "You will become an empty shell, or a rabid dog. The only thing at the end of the day you have left is your dignity." He knew that Itachi had stolen his dignity long ago. That man had stolen so much from him. His pride, his family, his love, and his childhood. He no longer knew if he wanted Itachi dead for justice or vengeance. When he was a little, he said to his parents' graves he would get justice for their deaths. But now he did not know the boundary between vengeance and justice. All he knew is that he wanted Itachi dead. He also knew that Orochimaru would be able to give him the power to defeat his brother. He slung his pack over his shoulder and left a note on his desk. He knew Shio would read it. He hoped she understood his reasoning. He would not lose himself to vengeance like Menma spoke of. He would control it and temper it until it was a spear that would be driven right into Itachi's heart. Because vengeance is justice. And he was the spear to mete that cold justice out. He walked out of his house and shut the door with a final click. Konoha Forest. The next day. They were on their 3rd day heading back towards the village when a message hawk intercepted them. The bird had a Konoha headband tied to its back and the scroll attached was black. Black usually signified very dangerous and critical missions to the Leaf Village. Anko opened it and read out loud. Mission rank S. Objective. Back up the Konoha team sent to retrieve Sasuke Uchiha who went missing yesterday night. Genin Sakura Haruno spotted the Uchiha walking out of the village. It is assumed that the Uchiha went rogue. Team 9 is to back up the team sent to retrieve the Uchiha immediately. It is estimated that the Uchiha is being escorted by some of Orochimaru's top soldiers. Anko looked seriously at her team and they all nodded and disappeared in shunshuns. Konoha Forest. Kiba vs. Saken. Kiba panted as he snuck through the water to get away from his opponent. Nothing he could do affected the twins. If one was defeated, the other took control and healed the other. Akamaru was injured and he had very little chakra left. He sneaked out of the pond but froze when he smelled the presence of his enemy behind him. He looked around in horror, but before the combined twins could attack, they were stopped by a puppet in a black cloak. A voice called out from the surrounding forest, "Well, well, look who the cat dragged in. An illegal sound ninja. Seems I came in the nick of time, a konoha nin." Konkuro appeared with two puppets hovering around him. Neji versus Kidomaru. Neji panted as he prepared for the final strike by Kidomaru, but was shocked when all of the giant mosquitoes around him were eaten by snakes, and Anko appeared with two overly long kunai, grinning savagely. The sexy and single snake mistress of Konoha has arrived. Choji versus Jirobu. Choji opened the container to his red pill, but before he could swallow it he was stopped by a delicate hand, and Yakumo appeared in a storm of black sakura petals. "There is no need for that, Choji, we can take him together without your enhancements." Shikamaru versus Tayuya. Shikamaru hid behind a tree, breathing heavily. He knew he stood no chance against this girl. Before he could give up hope, a strong gust of wind prevented the sound waves from reaching the lazy genin. Tamari appeared. "Well, if it isn't the guy who surrendered to a girl. Still think our gender is too troublesome." Shikamaru smirked a bit at his help and knew they had the advantage. Rock Lee versus Kimimaro. Lee knew he was in trouble. Kimimaro completely countered his fighting style. The Kagaya was completely undefeatable in taijutsu and could deflect any of his attacks. He gritted his teeth and prepared for the end when a wall of sand protected him from the Kagaya's attack while chakra strings pulled him away from the conflict. Lee looked around and was stunned to see Gaara and Menma standing there in front of him, both looking cool and collected. Gaara stared at the enemy. "Being a ninja of sound is illegal. I will help the Leaf as a member of the Redeemed Sand." Menma stepped forward besides the red-haired Jinchuriki. "I will protect my teammate, either surrender or face death. It's your choice." Kimimaro stared at his two new opponents apathetically and extended two new swords from his wrists. "This mission was ordered by Lord Orochimaru, you will not interfere." All of the opponents were lined up and the Konoha ninja were about to make a comeback against the Sound 5. Valley of the End. Naruto rushed forward to the two statues of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. She could not believe Sasuke would do this. Why would he just go and abandon his friends, his life, even his teammates, all for revenge? She knew she could never understand her teammate. She had lived a privileged life and never desired revenge on anyone. How could she understand someone who lost his entire family in one night and had to live knowing that the murderer was still at large? She could not even begin to think of the feeling. However, despite not understanding him, she knew that Sasuke could not go to Orochimaru. It was not the correct path to get revenge against Itachi. Orochimaru would just use Sasuke and then take his body. She jumped up the statue of Hashirama and landed on the stone head and shouted over the sound of the waterfall to the figure of Sasuke standing on the head of Madara Uchiha, "Sasuke." Sasuke stopped walking and slowly turned around. Shio could not contain the gasp that left her lips on seeing what Sasuke had become. The left side of his face seemed to be glowing with a greenish energy. His left pupil had the Sharingan activated. However, instead of the normal red and black, it was now white and green. In addition, instead of 3 commas, the symbol was now 3 crossing spears. Sasuke stared at his former teammate. He cursed the fact that she had caught up to him. She was too innocent to get caught up in his life. He was a monster in human skin while she was innocent despite her profession. He knew he would have to cut all ties with the blonde Chunin here and now. He could not afford to have her in his life. No monster could ever be loved or love another. Sasuke smirked darkly at Shio. "Yo." His voice had taken a multi-layered tone. He had found a new way to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan by accident. By accepting the spirit of vengeance inside of him. He bonded with the spirit of Callista and had become the symbol of vengeance. Shio scowled at Sasuke's nonchalance at the situation. He was turning into a monster and seemed utterly unconcerned with the fact. She scowled and shouted across the valley once again, "Sasuke. Come back to Konoha. Do you not realize that Orochimaru only wants you to take your body? After he is done with you, he will just throw you away." Sasuke kept his cool look on his face and responded, "I don't care. Orochimaru has given me this power and it will eventually grow enough to be stronger than Itachi. The souls of the people he betrayed cry out in anger and wish for his head." Shio frowned. "What are you talking about, Sasuke? The spirits of your family are gone. How could they wish for his death? Sasuke chuckled again. No, they are not gone. They are all around me, crying out in pain as their betrayer still walks this earth. An ethereal spear formed in Sasuke's hand. I have become the spirit of vengeance. You will not stop me, Uzumaki. Shio shed a tear and unsealed her nodaki, and wind began to pick up around her and seemed to play a tune. It was a sorrowful melody, as if mourning for the fight between the two former teammates. Soon Sasuke jumped forward, his spear blazing, and Shio streaked forward to meet his attack, wind howling in preparation from the clash of titans ahead. The fight between vengeance and innocence had begun. It was the end of the halcyon days of Konoha. Chapter 19. Battle of the Crossroads. Kiba x Kankuro vs Saken. Kiba looked shocked as Kankuro appeared just in time to save him from the Sound Nin's assault. Kiba recognized the guy from the Chunin exams. What are you doing here? Kankuro smirked. I am here to save you, idiot. The ninja of the sand have allied with the leaf. We were in the area and decided to help out. Saken scowled at the puppet shinobi. It doesn't matter how many of you come, the result will still be the same. Saken rushed forward at great speed and grasped his hand on Kankuro's shoulder, however his cell merging technique was not working. What the hell? Kankuro poofed into smoke and turned into a puppet with a large barrel chest. The puppet swallowed Saken whole and Kankuro revealed himself to be one of the other puppets. Now you're done. Secret puppet black art. Iron Maiden. The crow puppet detached and each part revealed a blade which was sent through small holes in the capture puppet. All was silent as blood seeped through the holes of the wooden weapon. Kiba sighed and sat down heavily. Thanks. Kankuro glanced at him. No problem. Let's get you out of here. Neji x Anko vs Kidomaru. Neji gaped at Team 9's sensei killing all of the mosquito summons he had been trying to defeat in just a few seconds. The mosquitoes were able to drain his chakra and blood, which left him drained after each attempt to defeat them. Anko stood there grinning cockily as she faced off against the mosquito summoner. Kidomaru was furious. You killed my insects. Anko smirked again. Ah, did I kill your wee little friends? However, Anko suddenly turned very serious, just like Orochimaru did to me. With those words, Anko relentlessly attacked Kidomaru, not giving him any quarter for a counter-attack. Kidomaru could not even perform jutsu as he dodged the relentless snake-style taijutsu and kunai combination. Kidomaru began to run away, knowing he was outclassed. However, Anko just stood there and smirked at the running Sound Ninja. It's already too late, you're marked for death. On the back of Kidomaru was a seal that glowed red, and Kidomaru suddenly had a kunai directly through his heart. What not a lot of people know is that Anko is actually a journeyman in sealing. After she received the curse mark, she trained for years to try and remove her curse. Over time, when she could not find a counter seal, she decided to dabble into the more combat aspect of fuinjutsu. Using this, she came up with the Death Seal. A simple storage seal that releases a weapon directly into the opponent's heart. By using this seal, if Anko touches her opponent once, the person dies. Anko jumped down and scooped up the downed Hyuga. Alright, let's get out of here. Neji sighed and nodded. However, Anko suddenly turned to him with a scary face. If you tell anyone about my seal, I will make you wish you were dead. Neji started sweating and nodded rapidly. Choji x Yakumo vs Jirobu. Jirobu started to laugh at what he thought was a weak genin girl. Haha. What can a frail and wimpy girl like you do to me, eh? Yakumo smiled. I do not have to do anything. You were dead the moment I landed on the field. Jirobu glared. HMPH, don't try to act tough, girly. You haven't done anything as far as I am cons. He stopped suddenly as he spat out blood. What? Yakumo smirked and released the genjutsu, dissolving into black lotus blossoms and appearing behind Jirobu. The minute I entered this field, you were already in my genjutsu. Now die for harming my comrades. She ran through hand signs and forced visions of many horrors upon Jirobu, rendering him into a vegetable state, all with a smile on her face. Choji shuddered as he saw her smiling face. What Yakumo did not know is that she had earned a nickname in Konoha from her genjutsu and always sunny personality. The smiling sadist. Yakumo turned to Choji with a brilliant smile. Well, shall we go, Choji? Choji gulped and nodded in fear. Shikamaru x Tamari vs Tayuya. Temari blasted another sound genjutsu away with her fan and turned to Shikamaru. Oi, lazy brains, what is this girl's skillset? Shikamaru ignored the insult and responded, she can send genjutsu through that flute of hers. She can also summon Oni demons to help fight for her. Temari nodded. I see, well then I will just prevent her from doing anything then. She raised her fan and fully extended it and whipped blood across the 3 moons, Weasley sickle wind cutting jutsu. She unleashed her weasel summoning contract and combined it with her wind, cutting down every tree in a cone in front of her, crushing Tayuya underneath. Shikamaru deadpanned at the scene, so violent. Temari smirked at her handiwork. Alright, let's meet up with the others lazy bones. Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome. Gaara x Menma vs Kimimaro. Gaara and Menma stood before the bone manipulator, both sides preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Lee spoke seriously to his 2 rescuers, be careful, he is able to manipulate his bones and use them to attack and defend. Menma nodded and inwardly thought of Inari's mention of the Kagaya family that was descended from the sage's brother. He had researched the 4 clans that Inari had mentioned and learned that the Kagaya clan had been wiped out in the bloodline purge of Kiri. It seemed that one escaped the purge. He glanced at Gaara. Their abilities did not combine well at all. Gaara primarily focused on defense and letting his opponent wear him or herself out. He primarily focused on ending the fight before it began, and if that failed, going for one-hit kills. However, he was sure they could win. He had to win this fight. He spoke to Gaara. Shield and sword. Gaara nodded, understanding. Menma applied that Gaara would focus only on defense while Menma would focus on attacking. Menma activated his chakra scalpels and dashed towards Kimimaro. The bone user responded by thrusting his sword forward, however before he could skewer Menma, Sand deflected the attack and the spider summoner pressed his hand into a palm thrust against Kimimaro's chest and chakra blasted the bone user's internal organs and propelled Kimimaro away. Menma looked at the prone figure of the Kagaya. He should be dead, very few can survive their internal organs being attacked. However, Sand pushed him aside as a bone spike erupted from the earth and Kimimaro stood up from his place on the ground. Menma wanted to gape at the bone user. How could he possibly have survived that strike? He knew his take on Tsunade's super strength technique was more internal and external like Tsunade. He ruptured the internal organs by turning the vibrations of normal palm strikes into sound waves. In order to survive this, Kimimaro must have completely reworked his bone structure to create a dense layer underneath his skin to block the sound waves. The chakra cost must have been enormous, not to mention the risk to his health. Bones create blood for the body. If he creates more blood than normal, he is risk to blood-related diseases due to how much red blood cells in his body versus white blood cells. Any serious illness could become terminal with that much blood. If he wasn't seriously sick already, he removed many years from his lifetime. Kimimaro removed bones from his shoulders and dashed forward again at Menma, dodging Sand around him as he streaked towards the medic. When he got close to Menma, the spider summoner spun around the thrust and unsealed a syringe and stuck it in the Kagaya's neck. The needle barely pierced the skin but released the contents of the syringe anyway. The battle continued and Menma continued to inject the Kagaya with the mixture with every chance he received. Gaara saved him from many attacks that the Sound Nin attempted while the spider summoner continued his plan. Menma jumped away and flashed through handseals until he bit his thumb, summoning jutsu. 4 spiders appeared and attacked the Kagaya. When Kimimaro tried to skewer the spiders with his bones, they jumped away in split seconds. The medic jumped to Gaara's side and explained his plan. He has covered his entire with bones, making him almost impenetrable. However, his weakness also lies in his defense. He has drastically increased his chance for disease. I injected him with a blood-strengthening mixture and a medicine to increase blood flow. The syringe I injected him with I covered in enough chakra to pierce his outer bone and enter his bloodstream. We only have to delay him and let the diseases already in his body begin to react to his increased blood flow. Those spiders I summoned are known as sprinter spiders. They are infamous for their dodging ability. They will give us time. Distract him with your sand and we can only hope there are diseases in his body. Otherwise we will have to take drastic action to break through his bone structure. Gaara nodded and his sand began to bombard the Kagaya and distract him even further from the attacking spiders. Soon Kimimaro began to breath heavier and slowed down, allowing some sand to bash into him and spiders to bite him, injuring him further. Menma waited a bit more and rushed forward and once again hit the bone wielder with a palm thrust and managed to weaken him enough for the disease to fully take hold. Kimimaro spat out blood and began to drive heave as his lungs gave out on him. However, Gaara was forced to raise all three ninja into the air as Kimimaro unleashed his final attack. An entire bone forest erupted in the clearing, skewering anything in its path. After the attack died down, the two leaf and one sand nin sat on the sand observing the bone structures around them. Menma spoke up after a while. It's sad that a once proud clan ended on an inglorious battlefield like this. Nothing more than a distraction so Sasuke can get away. Gaara nodded and looked above as dark clouds began to cover the sun. All we can do is hope Shio wins. It is up to her now. The other two genin nodded and looked in the direction of the Valley of the End. Valley of the End. The green aura around Sasuke intensified and an ethereal spear appeared in Sasuke's hands. He remembered when he gained this power during the night he decided on his path of dark justice. Flashback. Sasuke declared to himself, "Even if I walk the path of darkness, I will achieve my vengeance." Upon these words, his left Sharingan activated on its own and began to emit a green glow and shifted forms to three intercrossing lances, and he clutched his eye in pain. He blacked out and saw darkness all around him. He looked around frantically as a green mist surrounded him. Soon a figure emerged from the mist and approached the Uchiha. The figure was a woman clad in old clan-era armor. She had long black hair tied in a ponytail and her skin emitted a green glow. She stopped in front of him and spoke in a multi-layered voice, "Greetings, young Uchiha. I am Callista Uchiha, your ancestor. I was once the proud leader of the Uchiha clan. Before that bastard Madara Uchiha stole the title from me. He stabbed me in the back during a mission to gain my title and erased me from the clan's history." Sasuke's eyes widened. This was the spirit of his ancestor. And if he heard her words correctly, she was once stronger than Madara Uchiha, the strongest Uchiha ever recorded. Callista continued. "During my betrayal, my Sharingan evolved and I developed a new technique. Kagutsuchi. This technique bound me to the aspect of vengeance. For a century I have hunted betrayers, ending their existence. However, the one who I wish the most has escaped me for just as long. Madara Uchiha has still escaped my hunt." Sasuke widened his eyes. Madara Uchiha lived 100 years ago. How was he still alive? Especially after the battle against Hashirama. Callista continued her explanation to the genin. "However, recently I have detected Madara's movement. He is moving through the Akatsuki. He knows of me, and hides from my vision. So he moves through others instead of himself. I have decided that I need to draw him out. My method will be you." Sasuke widened his eyes at this statement. "Why me?" The embodiment of vengeance chuckled darkly. "Your entire life revolves around betrayal. Your path will force you to end many betrayers. My power, as well as yours, will grow stronger with the death of every betrayal. The death of Itachi Uchiha and Orochimaru will empower me enough to kill Madara once we draw him out." Sasuke was confused. "Orochimaru? I was going to go to him to learn from him, not kill him." Callista chuckled again. "Yes, what better opening to kill him? You shall learn everything you can from him, then kill the betrayer of hundreds." Sasuke nodded in agreement. He was not planning on being the lapdog of Orochimaru forever anyway. "How will I gain the power of Kagutsuchi?" The glowing women explained. "I will put a small piece of my power within you. This will replace the soul within your curse seal. Upon activating the seal, instead of using Orochimaru's power, you will use my power." Sasuke nodded. It sounded like an excellent agreement, but he knew nothing ever came free. What is the catch? Callista smirked at the last Uchiha. "Ah yes, as they say in this time, the catch. Once Madara is dead, you will take my place as the aspect of vengeance." Sasuke widened his eyes. "What? How is that a bad thing?" Callista scowled at his naivety. "I have spent an entire century hunting the scum of the earth. It is a thankless job. A loveless job. If you accept his deal, you will never know the warmth of another human. You will remain forever friendless, forever alone. If you seek the ultimate justice, you must become just as bad a monster as the people you are hunting. Are you prepared to make this sacrifice? To sacrifice yourself for the good of the world?" Sasuke pondered this information. He had stated that one of his goals would be to have a family and respawn the Uchiha clan. However, this may be his only opportunity to achieve his goals. He thought of Shio. He may have loved her eventually, and she may have loved him in return. But he knew his path. The path of a monster. He nodded. Callista smirked and took out a spear from her chest and stabbed Sasuke in the chest. Then you shall be reborn, with the cold blade of dark justice. End flashback. His green aura intensified and his spear grew brightly as he yelled at Shio from across the valley. You will not stop me, Shio. My path has been set and so has my fate. I will walk this path whether you try and stop me or not. He met Shio's sword in the middle of the waterfall and they began an aerial battle of spear versus nodaki. They continued to fall down the waterfall while still battling with their chosen weapons until they were forced to separate and prepare for landing on the water below. Shio used her wind manipulation to slow her fall and land gracefully on the water while Sasuke jumped from rock to slow his fall and splash down roughly on the water. Shio flashed through hand signs and called out, "Cutting breakthrough." She unleashed a cutting gale of wind that slammed into the Avenger and picked up a dust cloud when the blades of wind cut into the cliff behind him. Shio waited a bit but was forced to dodge 3 ethereal spears that emerged from the cloud and Sasuke emerged, unharmed from the wind attack. The spears continued until they exploded with a bright flash when they made contact with some trees, completely eradicating where they struck. The Uzumaki frowned as she stared at her former teammate. Was this how Naruto felt when he was abandoned? Complete betrayal of one's trust. She had loved him, not as a lover, but as a brother. And he spat upon that love and betrayed them all. Now he was trying to kill her. She continued to shed tears but furiously wiped them away. It wouldn't do for her eyes to get blurry in this fight. Sasuke flashed through some hand seals and called out in his multi-layered tone, "Great Fireball Jutsu." Instead of the regular red flames, the fire now burned with a green tint. Shio channeled wind chakra into her sword and dashed forward, appearing behind the fireball as it was cut in two. She continued to dash forward and struck Sasuke with her nodaki in a thrust. The Uchiha deflected the attack with effort. Any normal spear would have long been cut in two, but Sasuke's spear held against the blonde Shunan's onslaught. He knew that the most dangerous aspect of Shio's sword style was not the sharpness of her sword enhanced by wind chakra, but rather that she can shift the length of her sword. In the midst of combat, an unwary opponent would be defeated simply by the shifting length. However, he had been Shio's teammate for a year, he knew all of her tricks. However, she did not know any of the tricks of his new power. He readied one of his spears and threw it at Shio. Shio dodged to the side but Sasuke quickly put his hands in a snake sign and the spear exploded, sending Shio back in pain from the explosion. However, the Uzumaki recovered and swung her sword at the Uchiha, sending the cutting wind at the Uchiha. Sasuke responded by swinging his spear in a twirling motion, sending cuts of translucent green fire at the waves of wind. It was proof of the green fire's strength that the fire overpowered the wind and slammed into the shocked genin, once again sending Shio flying and burnt from the attack. Sasuke raised his spear again and charged forward to attack the still down Uzumaki. However, as he approached, he had to suddenly stop and jump away as a cyclone of wind and water surrounded the Uzumaki. When the water dispersed, she was holding the weirdest sword Sasuke had ever seen. In the center appeared to be a stable Rasengan, with 4 blades of chakra surrounding it on 4 sides. A clone that was near Shio glared at Sasuke before dispersing. Sasuke looked at the sword made out of chakra. What is this technique? Shio glared fiercely at Sasuke and held her new sword in front of her and spoke calmly, the culmination of all my wind and chakra manipulation. The pinnacle of chakra manipulation, Zelos. She levitated the sword with her palms and darted forward at fast speeds, using wind manipulation to remove the wind pressure and tunnel vision. Sasuke could barely keep up with the unique chakra sword. Shio could wield it like a traditional sword, but also split it into 4 swords at any point in the battle, constantly harassing the Uchiha. If Sasuke had not had his Sharingan, he would have been defeated. He jumped away from Shio while throwing lances and panted a bit. He was no match for Shio in close combat and he knew he could not defeat her endurance. He had to end this in a single shot. He began pouring his power into the spear he held and the aura around him diminished until it was all contained in his right arm. The spear in his hand glowed brightly from the power within it. Shio stared hard at her teammate, ending it in one shot yet again. A Sasuke. I guess I will take that game against you. She channeled more wind chakra into the Rasengan in her hand that contained the swords. The wind chakra made the 4 blades around the sphere to start to spin around in a circle, creating a spiraling saw blade. Sasuke dashed at Shio, determined to end this while Shio also jumped forward with her now shuriken-like Rasengan. They met at the center of the Valley of the End in a clash of green fire and wind. Each screaming their technique in the heat of battle. Arc of Vengeance. Zelo's Rasengan. The conflicting attacks caused a large explosion that could be seen for miles. Shio imagined herself just simply hovering before her teammate who she considered a brother. She contemplated how little she actually knew of her friend. She knew nothing of hatred or vengeance. She had no idea what it was like to have a family suddenly ripped away from you. She remembered when she was in a similar situation like this with her brother. Both using their final attacks in their battle that seemed so long ago. She didn't understand him then either. What right did she have to try and decide his life if she could not even look her brother in the eye without guilt? She released a single tear as she smiled at her glowing teammate and shifted her attack a bit and was overwhelmed by the power of Sasuke's attack, only managing to scratch the leaf symbol on his forehead. When the attack died down, Sasuke stood over his downed teammate. She was still alive. The Uzumaki constitution and Jinchuriki life force meant that she could take a lot of punishment. However, he felt no pleasure at his victory. Yes, he had defeated the Rookie of the Year. But in that final clash he saw with his Sharingan her final act of letting him win. He turned and left, knowing the next time they met he would get a more conclusive answer to who was stronger between them. As he exited from the Valley of the End he looked behind him and imagined all his friends and teammates back in Konoha, all smiling kindly at him. He then imagined them frowning and glaring at him for his actions. He hardened his heart and walked on. To the lair of the snake. It was far too late for regrets now. Back in the Valley of the End. Kakashi stood over his fallen genin and shed a tear as he picked her up on his back. I was too late again, Obito. Pakun, who had led Kakashi here, turned to the white-haired Jonin. I can't pick up the trail, the rain has dispersed his scent. Kakashi nodded. As an experienced tracker he knew this, but it was still devastating to hear. Let's return then, the mission has failed. Sasuke has gone to Orochimaru. Chapter 20. Diverging Paths. Konoha Hospital, 4 days after the rescue Sasuke mission failed. Sunlight streamed into the hospital room, illuminating the sleeping face of a heavily bandaged Shio. When the sunlight hit her face she stirred a bit and slowly opened her eyes, blinking the sleep out of them. She slowly sat up and wondered why she was in a hospital. She looked around the room and saw a slashed headband on her bedside table and remembered the events at the Valley of the End and hung her head sadly. A nurse entered and noticed she was awake and smiled kindly. Good morning, Namikaze-san. You have been asleep for 4 days. I will go get you something to eat and inform he doctor. Shio nodded as the nurse bustled off to do her duties and the Uzumaki silently contemplated the future. She knew she could never understand her teammates' feelings, but she knew that Orochimaru was not the correct path to follow. Every fiber of her being wanted to rush out there and bring him back and try to find out how to understand him better. But she knew she was no match for Orochimaru. Eventually she had a routine checkup with the doctor and he explained that she was steadily recovering, much faster than any normal patient, and would be able to leave in 2 days. When the doctor left she sighed and began to eat her breakfast. However, she was distracted when she heard a large thump outside the window and looked out to see her godfather Jiraiya sitting there on a giant toad. Jiraiya waves and grins. Hey Gaki. Shio grins. Pervy sage. Jiraiya comically falls over on his toad after hearing the nickname Shio has been calling him since childhood. Jiraiya sighed and decided to get the point. I talked to your parents while you were unconscious and they have agreed for me to take you on a 3-year training trip. Shio widened her eyes. The longest she had been out of the village was a couple of weeks for a mission, but 3 whole years. She looked at Jiraiya seriously. Why do we need to train outside of the village? Couldn't we just train inside the village? Jiraiya nodded at the point and spoke. I need to maintain my spy network and I can't do that while staying in the village. Shio nodded and remembered the glowing green face of Sasuke and clenched her hands. Alright, I'll go. Jiraiya noticed her clenching hands and commented. You know, you can't Sasuke back, he chose his path. Shio looked down. I don't want to bring him back. Jiraiya looked at Shio surprised. You don't. Shio shook her head and looked up. I wish for him to be happy. I haven't told anyone, but I can sense emotions. And every time I looked at Sasuke I saw him always drowning in misery and depression. However, the only time I saw him without sadness was when he left the village. He was full of resolve and a desire for vengeance that it was scary. Jiraiya looked surprised at this information. Feeling emotions is not an unrecorded skill. The last time it showed was in the first Hokage's wife, Mito Uzumaki, who was also the Jinchuriki for the nine-tailed demon fox. He looked out over the village, thinking of the past with Orochimaru. Sometimes, some ninja just can't stand to be chained down, as they call it in a village. Orochimaru was also one of these people. You should just give up bringing Sasuke back to the village. Shio shook her head. I won't give up. If I meet him again I'll try and convince him, but not until I find a way to understand him. Jiraiya nodded and left, but before he called over his shoulder, meet me at the Konoha gates when you are fully healed. Shio sighed and kept looking out at the village, pondering the future. She was interrupted 2 hours later when the door opened and Menma entered, carrying some flowers. The spider summoner put the flowers in a vase beside the bed and sat down in a seat, and glanced at his former sister and coughed awkwardly. I hope you are healing well. Shio smiled at her brother, feeling his confused, but fond feelings for her, much improved since the confused and sad emotions he had been feeling for her for so long. I am healing well, thank you. Menma looked out the window and pondered what to say. He had come here because he had heard his sister had woken up, but he was not sure what to say now that he was here. He had spent a long time hating his sister, but now he felt affection for her. Her sunny personality made it nearly impossible to hate her. He looked at his sister's face and spoke. I am sorry about your teammate. Shio's face fell at these words and he winced. He was not used to much social interaction and did not mean to bring up a bad topic. His sister sighed. He made his choice and I will respect it, however I will understand him, and when I do I can stand in front of him as an equal and we will fight again. And when I win, we can return together. Menma stared at his sister and frowned. Sasuke and Shio were the two most opposite people he had ever met. It always amazed him how well they got along. He breathed deeply and spoke. Sasuke lost everyone he knows and walks blindly through the darkness to find the source of his pain, in this case his brother. You who have never known significant loss would be able to understand that pain. Shio looked down in sadness but Menma was not finished. However, that does not matter. The blonde Uzumaki looked at him in confusion but Menma was looking away, thinking of his teammates and sensei. Even if you cannot understand him, you can still empathize with him. No one can share every single bad experience in our lives to understand each other. If you empathize with him, you will be able to understand him, without experiencing the same horrors as him. His former sister looked down in contemplation and he stood up, more resolved after speaking with his sister than ever and opened the door and spoke to her behind him. Don't forget yourself while chasing after him, Shio. He left the room and strode to the chief medic's office with a purpose. He opened the door and saw Tsunade standing by a large window, looking out over Konoha. Tsunade turned to him slightly and smiled. I figured you would come here when you heard Jiraiya was bringing Shio on the training trip. Menma nodded and bowed, his head facing the ground as he made his request. Please Tsunade-sama, train me to be a full-fledged medic nin. Tsunade looked at the Chunin before picking up his record. It says here you are a prodigy in the more combat-oriented fields of medical ninjutsu. However, your knowledge of the healing aspect of it is woefully ignored. It seems when you learned medical ninjutsu you decided to only use it to damage and hurt people. This goes against many of the codes for medic nins. Menma winced. When he was training as a child he learned the mystic palm jutsu only and quickly went on to the more combat-oriented sections of medical chakra, wanting to get an edge over his sister. However, he knew better now and spoke seriously. When I was abandoned by my family I wanted an edge over my sister and used medical ninjutsu to do it. However, I no longer hold hatred for my family in my heart and I wish to learn the true art of medicine. I no longer wish to kill my enemies, but to heal my allies. I want to be able to heal my teammates if anything similar happens to Lee or anyone else again. Tsunade smirked. Good answer, brat. I will apply you as my official apprentice, allowing you not to take missions until I say so. Since you already know the basics of the healing principles of medical ninjutsu, I will train you for the next 2 years in all the advanced medical techniques. Surgery, bone mending, nerve fixing, mental help, all the difficult techniques. Menma nodded seriously and asked, what about the final year Shio will be training with Jiraiya? The slug Sanin spoke as if it was obvious. You will train on your own for that year. You seem to improve better when left to your own devices, and I am sure there are more secrets left to master with your summons. Menma widened his eyes at hearing this. Arachne said it would take a year or more to learn many of the advanced spider summoning abilities. This was a perfect opportunity to learn them. He bowed deeply again to his new sensei. Thank you for this opportunity, sensei. I will not let you down. Tsunade smirked. I know you won't, Gaki. Now get going. I have a lot of paperwork to get done. Naruto nodded and left, feeling happy he had finally chosen a path in life, the path of a healer. He remembered all of the injuries he could not heal. He would never be so helpless again and would become one of the best healers in the elemental nations. He knew he could do it. He was the forgotten son of the Namikaze and Uzumaki lines. He was the forgotten doctor. Gai Dojo. Lee walked into the Gai family dojo and looked at his sensei he had been apprenticed to and prepared for the next 3 years of training. Gai, serious for once, stared at Lee critically. Lee, are you ready to learn the true secrets of the strong fist fighting style? Lee nodded seriously. I am ready, Gai sensei. Flames seemed to burn around Gai as he spoke. Then prepare for hell in my training. Your body will be pushed to the limit. Your brain will be fatigued. But if your spirit diminishes, you will fail this training. Let the fire of youth consume you and let us begin. Lee saluted and flames danced in his eyes. Yes, Gai sensei. T&I Division. Yakumo walked into one of the most feared locations in all of the Hidden Leaf without pause, determined in her mission. She passed many hallways until she arrived at the door she wanted. She paused outside of the door and took a deep breath, before opening the door to the most feared man in Konoha's office. Morimo Ibiki looked up and saw the genjutsu expert of Team 9 in his office. He put down his pen. What do you want, Shunin? Yakumo stared determinedly at the heavily scared man and made her request. I want you to train me. Ibiki raised an eyebrow at Anko's former genin. Why would I want to train you, Gaki? Yakumo used a genjutsu to transform the office into a torture chamber, because I know you're the premier genjutsu expert in the village and know talent when you see it. Ibiki looked around a bit. He could smell the dungeon, feel the dampness, hear the faint screams of other prisoners, and see the dreariness of his surroundings. However, as quick as the illusion came, it shattered to a million pieces when he fluxed his chakra. He leaned back in his chair and observed the seemingly innocent-looking girl. All right, brat, I'll see what you can do. But know this, I will not give you breaks or any quarter. If you fall during my training, that will be it. Got it? Yakumo clenched her hands in determination and stated clearly, yes, sensei. Yuhi Residence. A pink-haired girl knocked on the door to her sensei's apartment. When Kurenai opened the door, she spoke seriously. Sensei, I have something I wish to ask you. Kurenai looked a bit surprised before nodding and opened the door wider to let the girl in. Once they were situated on 2 couches, the red-ringed-eyed genjutsu mistress spoke first. What is this about, Sakura? Sakura Haruno looked determinedly at her sensei. She would no longer be useless and become a serious Kaneki. I wish to become your official apprentice. Kurenai raised her eyebrow. Why do you wish to become my official student, Sakura? You're already on my genin team. Sakura shook her head. No, I need to learn the more masterful arts of genjutsu. I wish to be as strong as my teammates, and become as strong as the best genjutsu users in the world. The genjutsu mistress nodded and felt proud. Her genin had come a long way from the fangirl she had gotten when they had graduated. She smiled and nodded. All right, Sakura, just so you know, I won't go easy on you. Sakura smirked and punched her fists together. I can take it, Shanaru. Orochimaru's base. Sasuke walked forward, escorted by Kabuto, and saw Orochimaru heavily bandaged, glaring at him with one exposed eye. Kabuto whispered into the genin's ear. Be respectful, he may be injured but he is still Orochimaru-sama. Sasuke glared at Kabuto with his Sharingan and the dark medic recoiled a bit at seeing the hatred in the gaze. Sasuke snorted and stared back at Orochimaru. So this is the grand betrayer himself. I will learn all I can from you before I bring vengeance upon you. Orochimaru smirked a bit. Well then Sasuke, let us begin your training. 2 days later, Konoha Gates. Shio walked forward with her backpack on and approached the gates to Konoha. She was fully healed and was walking to meet up with Jiraiya to go on her training trip. She perked up a bit when she saw Naruto leaning against a fence. She ran up to him and smiled. You came to say goodbye. Menma blushed a bit and nodded. Yeah, I am not going to see you in 3 years, you know. Shio smiled broadly. Don't worry, it will go by in a flash. I heard from Tu-san that you are now Tsunade's official apprentice, congratulations. Menma smirked. Well, someone has to patch you up when you get over your head. Shio frowned and stamped her food angrily. Please. When I get back I will be so strong I won't even need healing. Menma smirked again. Sure, I will see you later. How about we meet back up in 3 years? Shio smirked right back. Yeah. It's a date. They passed each other on the road, Menma heading towards the hospital, donning a white doctor's coat over his black outfit and Shio donning a traveling poncho and ran to meet with Jiraiya. Their fates up in the air now as they trained for the future. And the eventual battles with the Akatsuki and the puppet masters behind them. Chapter 21. Shippuden. Unknown location. Purple energy swirled around a cavern, forming a storm of energy. The power was uncontrolled, only contained by a large gate, with a ceiling tag holding it in. The energies were slowly coming together in the rough shape of a man. The form was still indistinct and blurred, but the figure seemed to open its eyes a bit, revealing purple slit pupils, and spoke in an echoing tone, soon. Outside the seal, Shio Uzumaki smiled as she came within sights of the majestic gates of Konoha for the first time in 3 years. Her armored dress shifting a bit in the wind as she walked with her godfather, Jiraiya. She had been away for 3 years during her training trip. They had traveled the 5 nations training and learning new things from Jiraiya's spy network. She had trained with the Toads for a time as well, finally mastering Senjutsu with the help of shadow clones. She had also decided to change her outfit after finding this battle outfit in a shinobi store in the land of Earth. She hoped the people back in Konoha liked her new look. She knew they would be impressed by her increase in ability. Konoha Hospital. So you were not trying to escape the hospital before you were released. The Jonin tied to the bed in spider silk quickly shook his head in fear as a large spider hung from the ceiling. The doctor made another tick mark on his clipboard. Good, because if you had tried for the 5th time this week, especially after your last accident on the previous mission, I would be very displeased. I would have to take. He looked at the cocooned Jonin and large spider on the ceiling. Drastic action to keep you contained. The Jonin paled further. Okay. I swear I won't try to escape anymore. The doctor nodded and dispelled the spider and bindings. If I see you try to escape one more time, I'm poisoning your food. The Jonin nodded rapidly and the doctor sighed and exited the patient's room. He walked down the hallway and entered Tsunade's office. Tsunade looked up. Menma, done threatening another patient, I see. Menma nodded. Yes, Azoi-san can't seem to stay in his bed, so I used some more permanent persuasion tactics. Tsunade smirked. Are you sure that's how a Jonin should be acting? Menma sighed. Tsunade had always teased him about being promoted to Jonin and he decided to still work in the hospital with her. He had been promoted to Jonin 1 year after Shio left for her training trip. He had learned some advanced medical techniques from Tsunade, from performing heart surgery to resetting bones, he learned it all. After 2 years of studying medical ninjutsu, he trained in the Forbidden Forest with the Spider Clan, mastering their senjutsu. In the 3 years he made more connections to his former parents as well. They were now close friends and met up together for dinner every Sunday. He adjusted his lab coat and tan turtleneck shirt before turning back to Tsunade. By the way, they're coming back today, right? Tsunade looked up from her paperwork. Yes, the brat and the pervert are coming back. You should meet them at the gate. Menma nodded and walked out of the hospital and made his way to the gate. He waved to a few acquaintances on his way. He had become rather well known in the village and had even earned himself a place in the bingo book as an A-rank nin. Bingo book entry 283. Name: Menma Gorgon. Alias: The Plague Bringer. Rank: A. Threat level: Be extremely cautious and do not engage without backup. Known skill: Highly advanced poison manipulation. Master medic nin. Master archer. Master chakra manipulation. Spider contract. He was quite proud of his accomplishments. Not to mention his secret ability that no one besides Tsunade and Arachne have seen. He had given himself a last name as well. Arachne had suggested it, saying that one of her best friends had that last name. It felt nice to have a last name again. If he ever decided to have a family, he would have a clan name. He continued to walk to the gate, preparing for the meeting with his sister he had not seen for 3 years. Konoha gates. Shio jumped onto a pole near the gates of Konoha and spread her arms wide, smiling at the feeling of the wind passing around her as she observed the city. She heard Jiraiya from below. Shio, go and get yourself reacquainted with the city. I will go report to your father. Shio nodded and was about to go explore before she heard from the side, Yo, Shio. You have grown taller. She turned and exclaimed happily, Kakashi-sensei. Crouching on a rooftop, the Cyclops John and I smiled. It has been a long time, Shio. Shio grinned her usual wide grin. It has. I have gotten a lot stronger, Kakashi. I am probably stronger than you now. Kakashi laughed a bit. I am sure you have a few years to go before you're at my level, Shio. Kakashi held up a hand before she could talk more. I have to meet up with Hokage-sama for a meeting. Go and find some of your friends to talk to. Shio nodded and Kakashi disappeared in a plume of smoke. She jumped down from the pole and began exploring the busy streets of Konoha. Shio wandered around until she passed through an alley and saw a familiar face. Her brother had changed a lot since she left Konoha. His hair was still in that spiky style he had 3 years ago, but his outfit had completely changed. He now wore a skin-tight black turtleneck, dark red shinobi pants with many pockets, and a white lab coat over the attire. She smiled and ran up to him while yelling, Menma. Menma's POV. Menma turned around when he heard his name and saw his sister for the first time in 3 years. She had changed much in the past 3 years. Instead of her eyesore orange attire, she now wore a red battle dress with matching armored leggings. Menma guessed that the armor was inscribed with anti-gravity seals to prevent the armor from hampering her combat. He smiled. Hello, Shio. It's been 3 years. Shio nodded and grinned. It feels so much longer though. We have so much to catch up on. Menma nodded. Yes, but later. We have just received a summons from Hokage-sama. Shio looked confused. How do you know? Suddenly an Anbu appeared and spoke. You are correct. You both are to come to the Hokage's office immediately. Both nodded and they all flickered away. Hokage office. Minato sat in his chair and pondered the current situation. The Akatsuki had showed signs of movement these past few months. However, what truly worried him was the situation with the Kyuubi. He had received an urgent missive from Jiraiya halfway into their training trip explaining that the Kyuubi's consciousness was not in the seal. The chakra was there, but the soul of the beast was not. He did not know if being separated from his yin half killed the Kyuubi, or that it escaped somehow. But it made controlling the Kyuubi's chakra both harder and easier. She now did not have to fight the consciousness of the Kyuubi for control of the chakra, but without the Kyuubi she could not make a deal to use small amounts of the energy. However, even without the Kyuubi's chakra, Shio was turning into a wonderful kunoichi. Her wind manipulation and sword skill was unparalleled in the village and had surpassed many foreign ninjas. He needed to see their skill firsthand, so he had prepared this demonstration of their abilities. The fourth Hokage looked up when he felt the familiar incoming chakra signatures and began speaking to the now present duo. Shio, Menma, it is good to see you both. I called you both here to demonstrate your abilities in a mock battle against an opponent of my choosing. Menma raised an eyebrow. Who are we going to be battling against, Hokage-sama? Minato grinned. Me. Shio widened her eyes and Menma frowned deeply. Hokage-sama, we stand no chance against you. Will this truly be a fair fight? Minato nodded. I will not be going at full strength and you will not need to injure me. Meet me at Training Ground 7, your senseis will be there along with a few other observers. The Chunin and Jonin nodded and they once again disappeared in a shunshin. Training Ground 7. Menma and Shio stood across from Minato, wine slowly blowing across the field as Jiraiya, Tsunade, Anko, Kakashi, and the remaining members of Team 7 and 9. The members of Team 7 and 9 had changed in the past 3 years. Lee still wore a dark green jumpsuit, but now he included a lime green scarf that nearly covered his mouth. Yakumo had decided to slightly mimic the style of her teacher and now wore a bandana trench coat combo. Anko had not changed her style but added 2 bracers to her arm with large blades attached to them, perfect for her snake style of combat. Kiba had changed a lot since his time as a genin. He now wore a more mature outfit than his last bulky coat. He wore a gray track jacket with matching pants. He also wore a face mask similar to Kakashi's. By his side was Orochimaru, now greatly increased in size. Minato took out 2 bells and showed them to both genin. You both already know the rules. I have 2 bells and each of you must get one by sunrise. Menma and Shio nodded and took their respective stances. A small time passed and Minato called out, "Begin." Shio exploded into action, summoning her Nodaki and appeared behind Minato, already swinging her sword to bisect him. However, when the blade was inches from Minato, he disappeared in a yellow flash and reappeared on a tree. Did I forget to mention that I pre-prepared this field before the test? I have placed Hirishin seals in 5 locations within the forest. You have to beat me before I teleport to the next mark. He would have continued, but he had to dodge out of the way from Menma, who appeared behind him with a palm thrust, completely obliterating it. As Minato jumped away from the palm thrust, he had to avoid a large gust of cutting wind sent from Shio's katana by throwing a Hirishin kunai into the air, effectively avoiding both attacks. Menma ran through some hand signs and spat poison in fast small balls, poison scatter shot. Minato weaved through the bullets and deflected a thrust from Shio's katana with his kunai. He spun in the air and kicked his daughter away from him in time to block a palm thrust by intercepting it with his arm. The Hokage was pushed back a bit by the large blast that was released from the palm. Minato observed the damage from the palm thrust. What insane chakra control! Instead of using Tsunade's super strength for brute force, he pushes the chakra out as a sort of cannon, destroying anything that he presses his hand against. He spun around and cut deeply into Menma's arm before he could dodge, scattering blood on the ground. He was confused when instead of the normal red liquid, the blood appeared black. Menma looked at the blood on the ground before smirking at Minato. "Hey Hokage-sama, did you know my blood is black?" Minato looked confused, but his eyes widened as spikes of blood erupted from the liquid on the ground, which would have impaled Minato if he had not replaced himself with a clone. Menma smirked and manipulated the black blood on the ground to cover his hands in the protective layer. He remembered when he had discovered this ability of his. Flashback. Menma was sorting out his medical supplies before he cursed when he cut himself on a sharp scalpel. He sighed and wiped his hand on a napkin and placed it next to him. Tsunade entered the room and stared at the dark liquid in confusion. "Menma. Why is your blood black?" Menma looked over and explained. "I ingested too much poison when training to become immune to it. My blood turned black as a result." Anko-sensei said this is a common situation among poison specialists. Tsunade shook her head and observed the blood more closely. "No, this isn't a case of blood poisoning. If you had the disease, it would make your blood a darker color, but not this dark. Your blood is completely black, which should be impossible because of the white cells in your blood." Menma blinked. "Then what do I have?" Tsunade looked puzzled. "I am not sure. I have not seen this before." Menma frowned and looked at the small drop of blood on his finger. He observed it a bit and then decided to channel chakra into it. What no one in the room expected was for the drop to extend in a sharp point in front of him. They both stared at the spike of blood as it slowly retracted as Menma removed the chakra in it. Tsunade broke out of her stupor and remarked, "We have a lot of training to cover." Menma just nodded, too stunned to say anything. End flashback. They had extensively tested his blood and found that it may be a new bloodline emerging. It seems that the combination of ingesting too many poisons and his bond with the spiders had altered his DNA more than anticipated. He no longer had any DNA from his parents and was almost an entirely new being. His body could contain much more blood, and he could control it with his chakra. He theorized this may be similar to how other clans gained their bloodlines, by constantly doing an exercise that altered their DNA. Back to the battle, Menma was using his bloody needles to constantly keep Minato on guard as he relentlessly attacked with palm thrusts. Despite his disadvantages, Minato was still able to effectively dodge all of the attacks, including some attacks by Shio. Menma had to dodge out of the way of a Hirishin Rasengan combo and jumped away as Shio came in with her sword glowing brightly. Shio reappeared around Minato 3 times while calling out, "Flying Swallow." Minato was forced to Hirishin away as the 3 simultaneous attacks would have cut him deeply. She had learned this move after being bugged by a swallow on their training trip. She had spent all day trying to kill it with her sword until she mastered this technique, the flying swallow. Hey, don't judge, the damn bird stole her last bite of ramen. The battle went on for hours, Minato evading and dodging all of their attacks with his Hirishin kunai. Near dawn Menma and Shio panted in the shade of a tree, exhausted from their long battle. Both were using their sensory techniques to keep track of Minato and knew he was only a half-mile away from their location. Shio took a long drink of water and spoke. "Hog, we need to find his weakness. He is nearly invincible with his Hirishin because there is nothing we can do to cage him in. During my SEAL training I could not find a good counter for the Hirishin besides what Orochimaru did at the Chunin exams. However, it would not work here because we do not have 4 people." Menma nodded and then thought of something. "Hey, you grew up with him for 13 years, surely you know something he is weak against." Shio thought heavily. Besides his slight allergy to peanuts, I can't think of." She trailed off as she grew a truly evil smile of a prankster at him. Menma's sweat dropped at the face and asked warily, "What?" Shio's grin grew as she spoke. "Menma-chan, how good are you at the henge?" Menma frowned harder at her calling him brother and then sweat dropped harder at her question. "Good enough to fool anyone without chakra sensing I suppose." Shio giggled a bit. "Here is the plan." Menma really wished she would stop grinning when she began to explain the plan. Forest clearing. Minato stood in the middle of the clearing waiting for an ambush. He was really proud of his 2 children, even if Menma technically wasn't his child anymore. He read the medical report that the DNA of his parents had been eradicated by his new bloodline limit. He had not known the black blood could be controlled though. He was told it just allowed him to produce more blood than normal. Well, he couldn't blame a ninja for keeping secrets. He kept looking around for an ambush when he heard his wife's thunderous voice, "Minato Namikaze." He spun around and spluttered when he saw his wife stalking up to him with her hair flying in its signature 9-tailed state. "Kashina. Haha, why are you here?" Kashina glowered. "Why didn't you tell me that my daughter had come back to the village? I would have met her at the gates the minute she walked through. And you just decide to wander off without telling me about this training exercise." Minato tried to explain but Kashina got right up to his face. "No excuses, you are going to stop this exercise or you are sleeping on the couch for a month." The whipped 4th Hokage was about to try and console his wife when Kashina smirked and held up the 2 bells, before disappearing in a plume of smoke revealing Menma, "We win Hokage-sama." Minato blinked a bit before bursting out laughing as Shio came out of hiding, also smirking at their victory. The rest of the audience appeared and began to congratulate the 2 on their victory. Shio smirked at her father. "I knew you were weak against Ka-san, 2-san. You were really whipped." Minato tried to defend his pride but Menma remarked, "Your reactions were a bit too real though. You did tell Kashina about this exercise, right?" Minato seemed to freeze a bit before starting to sweat. Shio looked at him and sighed. "Guess it will be sleeping on the couch for you, Dad." Everyone laughed as Minato seemed to despair at his wife's rage of not being informed her daughter had returned. Later that day, Shio looked curiously at Menma while they were walking together after the match. "You know Menma, you did not summon any spiders against Minato, I'm kind of surprised." Menma explained. "I cannot summon any spiders right now, I'm afraid. Arachne is preparing the ritual that will allow me the full benefits of the spider senjutsu. All the spiders are participating in this event. I'm told it's a time of great celebration when a new spider senjutsu wielder is about to be initiated." Shio nodded. "Yes, when I mastered senjutsu the frogs held a grand celebration as well. I did not use it against Minato because he would have stopped me from meditating to gather nature energy." Menma smiled a bit. "Well, besides our unorthodox win I am happy that you are back in the village, Shio-san." Shio smiled her classic wide grin, closed-eyed smile. "Yep. I'm glad to be back too, Menma." Uncount to the 2 laughing and smiling teenagers, however, a messenger hawk was already on its way from Suna, holding a message that would change their lives over the next year. The games had finally begun. Chapter 22. The Poisoned Sand. Konoha. An eagle with the Suna insignia flew into the message booth near the Hokage's tower. The active ninja on duty took the offered scroll and his eyes widened when he saw the color of the scroll, black, which means it's an emergency. I will take this to Hokage-sama. He rushed out of the room, running at top speed to bring the message to Minato's attention. 1 hour later, Minato's office. Minato spoke seriously to the two teams in front of him. This is an S-rank mission. The Kazekage, Gaara no Sabaku, has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki, presumably to remove his Biju. He looked seriously at the 5 shinobi in front of him: Shio Uzumaki, Mito Gecko, Sakura Haruno, Menma Gorgon, and Kakashi Hatake. You 5 are assigned this mission. Menma glanced around at the assembled ninja. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of most of his teammates. Sakura and Mito had undergone power spikes in the last 3 years. He observed Sakura. She had surprised everyone by quickly becoming one of the strongest rookies from the weakest in only 2 years. She had taken Kurenai Genjutsu and brought it to new heights. She had also changed her look in the recent years. Gone were the Chinese bright dresses and in were a sort of bondage-type gear that showed off much more than necessary. However, the lack of armor had not hindered her in the least, as most enemies never land a hit on her due to her illusions. She was a true rival to Yakumo Kurama, who had recently retired from missions to join the T&I department full-time. She had earned the nickname of the Deceiver. Mito Gecko had also earned a well-respected reputation as a swordswoman in recent years. She was famous for fighting with a broken nodaki that she had received from her father. She had created a new style that revolved around the broken blade. She was also famous for separating her chakra into physical and mental energy, only using her physical chakra in fights to give her great strength, speed, and mobility. She earned the nickname of the Broken Wing, symbolizing her broken sword style. Each member of the team had a specialization, so he knew they were well-rounded. He understood they would all be pushed to their limits against the Akatsuki, so he hoped it would be enough. Minato looked each member in the eye before announcing, "All right then, the Retrieve the Kazekage mission begins now." Each member of the new team yelled, "Hi!" and disappeared to get ready for the mission. Konoha Gates. The 5 members of the newly dubbed Team Kakashi arrived at the gate and sped off, traveling to the Land of Wind. After several hours of running, Shio spotted a familiar figure. "Hey, is that Temari?" Menma looked, and indeed the Wind Mistress of Suna was walking down the path they were following. She must be returning from her visit for the Chunin exams that are coming up. She can come with us. The report said that her brother is in danger. After many worried exclamations from Temari, the team +1 made good progress through the desert. Temari's expertise on the landscape helped speed up their journey tremendously. He also learned a new chakra exercise of keeping a platform of chakra under his feet to not be slowed down by the sand. It was very similar to water walking, so he managed it on the run, as did everyone else. When they arrived at the city, they were immediately escorted to the hospital. He ignored the loud exclamations of the obviously senile old lady to check up on Kankuro. Once the commotion had finally died down, he unsealed his lab coat and put it on, as well as a face mask and plastic gloves. The toxin in his body is iron-based. It is hard to form an antidote because of how sturdy the poison is. It is basically killing his cells from the inside out like a disease. However, he stuck a needle into Kankuro's arm. The moaning Jonin immediately appeared to go into a death-like state. Temari, who was watching, yelped in surprise, "What did you do?" Menma looked at her a bit annoyed. "I used a venom to put him into a brief coma. This will slow his heartbeat down to a crawl and stop the poison from going through the bloodstream. This will give me significantly more time to prepare an antidote." He pointed to a local doctor. The man jumped and questioned the Konoha medic. "Yes." Menma quickly wrote down a list of herbs and medicines and gave it to the man. "Quickly fetch me everything on this list. I can prepare an antidote after forcefully extracting most of the poison." The man nodded and he flashed through some hand signs, forming a large ball of water in the air. He put his hand on it and pulled out a large bubble. "I will warn anyone watching, this will be unpleasant." He made a small cut on Kankuro with a scalpel and forcefully inserted the water into the sand Jonin. If Kankuro had been conscious, he would have felt tremendous pain as the poison was forcefully expunged from his system. After nearly a half an hour of extracting the poison, he turned to the doctors who were observing. He is in stable condition, however I need those herbs to create an antidote to fully remove the poison, and hopefully create more antidotes for the rest of us to become resistant to its effects. The doctor nodded and an assistant came in with the required ingredients. After an hour of work, Menma re-entered the room 4 syringes of the antidote. He injected Konkuro with the antidote and revived him with medical ninjutsu. Konkuro slowly woke up from his forceful coma and blinked blearily as Tamari rushed forward to hug him. Menma sighed and wiped his face with a towel and took a drink of water after the surgery. That much precise chakra control was taxing on a person. If he had made one mistake, it could have costed Konkuro his life. He listened in as Konkuro explained the person he faced was Sasori of the Red Sands. He was intrigued by this. Sasori was one of the few known ninjas who could beat him in terms of poison mastery. Soon, however, they prepared to leave with the addition of Lady Chiyo, following the scent provided by Konkuro. Kakashi summoned Pakun, who sniffed the piece of Sasori's face mask, and the pug turned and spoke over his shoulder in his surprisingly deep voice. This way, the scent's faint but I can still follow it. Team Kakashi and Chiyo nodded before taking off at top speeds into the desert. Hopefully to find the cage alive before the Akatsuki extracted the Ikibi. Forest clearing. Several hours after Team Kakashi left Suna. The team and Suna shinobi made good progress through the desert, eventually crossing the border into the land of rivers, a simple nation comprised mostly of rice farmers. They were currently running through a forest when the 6 ninja were forced to stop upon seeing the 2 black and red clad members of the Akatsuki. Menma narrowed his eyes and prepared for battle. Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. Itachi tilted his head slightly in greeting. It has been a long time, Menma. Shio. Shio frowned as she inspected the 2 shinobi in front of her. Kisame was filled with bloodlust and happiness while Itachi's emotions seemed suppressed. She assumed that even Itachi must have felt guilt murdering his family, so he buried his emotions. Kakashi raised the headband covering his Sharingan eye and glanced at his team. Be wary of Itachi's eyes. One look into them and you will be trapped in a genjutsu. Sakura stepped forward slightly. Let me fight him. I have the best chances against his genjutsu. Mito also stepped forward, drawing her broken sword. Despite being broken in half, the sword still held a great length. I will fight Kisame, the rest of you go on ahead. Kakashi was about to protest when Mito glared at him hard. Even a war veteran like Kakashi had to be cowed by the resolution in the orbs. Don't worry, I will survive. Kakashi sighed and nodded. The 4 remaining members of the squad dashed around the Akatsuki members, Sakura and Mito covering for them as they made their way past. Soon after the 4 members left, the remaining 4 ninjas faced off against each other. Itachi versus Sakura. Itachi observed the pink-haired girl in front of him. She was dressed rather flamboyantly in what appeared to be a purple bondage outfit with a half-long skirt and a cape with a high collar. He had heard rumors of a genjutsu user without a clan becoming almost as good as him in genjutsu. It would seem he would get the opportunity to see if these rumors are true. Sakura stared into Itachi's Sharingan eyes without fear. She was constantly releasing the genjutsu placed upon her. She smirked a bit and took out a bottle and threw it at the ground, covering the area with smoke. Let us begin the battle then. Itachi looked around as the smoke cleared. There were several deceivers all around him. He figured she had used the smoke to hide some clones. A basic but good tactic. However, for someone like him, he could tell where the real one was easily. He dashed forward and punched a Sakura, but frowned when the clone disappeared into smoke and became 2 separate mirror images. He frowned. She must be replacing herself with clones while creating more every time he killed one. Once again basic and not what he expected. He saw a clone dash towards him and noticed the clone made no shadow. He let the clone hit him, knowing it would go straight through. He was shocked, however, when he felt pain from the punch and struggled to regain his balance from the constant barrage of attacks from the apparent clone. He was constantly fending off attacks from the mirror images of the pink-haired Jonin. What is this technique? My Sharingan cannot break down the illusion. I can tell they are all simply clones, but they deal real damage. In addition, he stabbed a Sakura with a kunai and frowned deeply when the clone simply split into 2. Every time I kill a clone it becomes 2. Sakura smirked at the struggling Uchiha, having a bit of trouble. I learned this technique to counter your brother. He broke my heart, you know. So I am going to break his. I guess I can start by killing his life's goal. If he was not Itachi Uchiha, he would have sweat dropped. It seemed that one of his little brother's fangirls had become psycho. He decided to take it up a notch and jumped into the air, blasting the clones below him in a large fireball. He landed safely away and grunted in annoyance when he felt a kick on his back from another Sakura clone. It seemed he had just doubled the entire amount of clones in the clearing. He was very impressed by this illusion. Whatever the pink-haired genin was doing, it perfectly countered the Sharingan. His eyes could not break the illusion down and was constantly under assault from mimics. If he was not a clone, he could have used his Mangekyo to break out, but he did not have enough chakra to sustain the technique. He sighed as he felt a kunai be buried into where the clone's heart was. As he melted away, he observed the once fangirl in front of him and spoke a few words. You are very skilled in the arts of illusions. I would like to fight you again someday, at full power. With those words he melted completely, revealing the face of an unknown Tsunajonin. Sakura frowned and stoppered up a bottle in her hands. She had worked on that smoke for years to counter the Uchiha's eyes. Instead of inserting her chakra into the opponent, she spread her chakra out in the smoke from the vial, creating mirages and other effects on the victim. Itachi had seen many clones of her splitting every time she was hit. Instead she was simply one and he hit the wrong way, seeing what the smoke made him saw. The Sharingan couldn't counter the illusion simply because it was not in the body. The Sharingan made the illusion more effective because it made the clones clearer and distinct to the wielder. It was the perfect illusion to counter an Uchiha. She began to run in the direction her allies went, hoping Mito was doing fine against Kisame. Mito versus Kisame. The two had jumped away from the illusionist battle and landed in a rocky field at the edge of the forest, perfect for their sword skills. Kisame eyed his opponent with a veteran's eye. The girl had her purple hair in a messy bun, letting her fringes nearly cover her cheeks. She wore a mix of bandages and plate armor for her clothes and leather sandals. Odd attire for a shinobi but perfect attire for a swordswoman. He also inspected the girl's sword. The katana was an odd one. It was perfectly straight and double-sided. One green signal glowed on the broken blade. It must have been quite beautiful when it was complete. He smirked at the purple-haired girl. How do you expect to fight me with that broken sword? Mito didn't say anything for a bit and readied her stance, preparing to spring forward. My blade may be broken. She dashed forward at great speed, appearing behind the cocky Akatsuki member, but my will remains strong and it will lead me to victory. Kisame barely had enough time to lift Samahata up to block her strike before being assaulted under fast and brutal strikes by the girl. She used an odd style of twirling around and jumping to gain openings. If Kisame hadn't known better, he would assume that was under assault by a killer rabbit. He separated away and flashed through one-handed hand signs, creating a large burst of water from his mouth that roared towards the girl like a tidal wave, with Kisame riding on top of it like a surfer. Mito dashed forward and used chakra to increase her leap, clearing the wave and slashing at Kisame as he passed. The shark-like man grunted a bit as he felt the broken blade cut into his shoulder. Kisame glanced at his cut shoulder and he felt his grin widen. Ah, you actually managed to cut me. That is impressive. But do you know what happens when a shark smells blood? Mito tightened her stance a bit as she felt the air get saturated with killing intent. Kisame dashed forward at great speeds, seemingly teleporting in front of the girl with his Samahata raised. They go into a feeding frenzy. The swordswoman barely had enough time to parry and dodge as the large sword swung in random but swift strikes at her guard. Mito knew she would have to get serious if she wanted a chance to survive. She gathered yin chakra around her and yelled in a burst of power, stunning Kisame for a few seconds from the force of the physical energy. The purple-haired woman jumped away and held her sword in front of her. Green energy seemed to energy emerged from the blade. She kept pumping energy and focused her will. Soon she was holding her completed katana. The sword was as long as she was tall and very wide for a katana. She had forged his sword after graduating as a sword master from her father, Hayate. However, 2 years ago his father had died on a mission against an unknown rogue ninja. She had broken her sword upon his gravestone and swore to rebuild her sword when she had avenged him. With a roar she swung her sword at Kisame. The force of the swing was so great that a shockwave of wind blasted from the blade and slammed into the shark man. Mito narrowed her eyes and entered into the move that had earned her nickname of the Broken Wings. She spun in several graceful arcs, cutting deeply into Kisame, before jumping high into the air, performing a flip and cutting the man in two as she descended. She panted as she observed the two halves of her opponent and frowned. The man on the ground was not Kisame. It was an unknown ninja that seemed to have flecks of ash dissolving around him. She sheathed her once again broken sword and ran to catch up with her teammates. They had a cage to save. Akatsuki Base. The four remaining members of the team stood before the base of the Akatsuki, which was a giant boulder with a sealing tag on it. Shio inspected the seal. It's a 5-point seal. Usually someone would have to remove all of the mimics of the seal in the area at the same time to remove it. However, I know a shortcut. I just have to cut the chakra connects with a counter seal. She quickly drew a seal around the 5-point seal and applied chakra. There, and now just the boulder. Menma stepped forward and rested his hand on the boulder. In a bright flash of light, which everyone had to avoid looking at, the boulder was reduced to rubble. They rushed inside only to look in horror as a giant cloud of chakra was absorbed into a statue's mouth and Gaara fell to the floor, seemingly dead. All 10 of the Akatsuki stood on top of the statue's fingers. Only the eyes were colored on the Akatsuki. The apparent leader of the group looked at them calmly with his purple-ringed eyes. The man spoke in an emotionless tone. Deidara, Sasori, deal with the annoyances. A hunchback and blonde man-woman nodded and jumped down from the fingers and all 8 of the other Akatsuki members disappeared. The blonde man-woman grunted and looked at the assembled group. HNNN. Which one of them is the Nine Tails? Shio drew her nodaki and wind gathered around her threateningly. Give Gaara back, you assholes. Sasori spoke up for the first time. That's her. The reports said she uses a nodaki and wind combination. Menma caught that phrase. They have information on all of us. I assume they know most of our abilities, while we know nothing of theirs. Shio spoke up while they prepared for their confrontation. I know Blondie. His name is Deidara of the Explosive Palms. He is an S-rank missing ninja from Iowa. He is well known for manipulating clay into explosives from his palms. Everyone nodded. However, Deidara summoned a large pelican-looking sculpture and it ate Gaara's body. The blonde-haired now confirmed man exited the hideout while calling out, "Catch me if you can, Nine Tails." Shio growled and chased after the effeminate man. Menma turned to Kakashi. Go back her up, Lady Chio, and I will face Sasori. The one-eyed Jonin nodded and chased after his pupil. Menma and Chio versus Sasori. Menma handed the old veteran 3 antidote syringes. Take these, I have already integrated the antidote into my immune system. His poison will not affect me. Chio nodded, storing the vials into her robes and spoke. That body is not his real one. It is a puppet named Hirako. He is inside the puppet. Menma nodded and dashed forward at top speeds, intent on destroying the puppet. Sasori responded by opening the puppet's mouth, revealing a machine gun which spat out hundreds of Senbon needles. Menma continued to dash forward, hardening the blood in his veins to prevent the Senbon from piercing him. He crossed his arms over his head and dashed right through the wave, shocking the 2 other ninja in the cavern. Menma barely had enough time to lean to the side to dodge a scorpion tail from the puppet. However, the tail was fast enough to cut his shoulder. Menma pressed his hand on the puppet and the entire thing imploded, causing a cloud of dust to settle over the battlefield. He looked into the dust. Did I get him? The dust settled and a black-clad figure emerged. The Akatsuki member removed the black cloak and revealed himself to the 2 ninja. Chio gasped when the surprisingly young face of Sasori was revealed. Chio looked shocked as she inspected her grandson. Impossible, he hasn't aged a day. Sasori sighed as he took out a scroll. I guess you guys deserve to face my favorite puppet. He unsealed the cloaked figure of the second cage. Chio looked horrified upon seeing the puppet. Sasori, what have you done? You have been responsible for the deaths of 3 of the cages of Suna. Sasori looked annoyed. Oi, I did not kill the 3rd cage, my subordinate led Orochimaru to him. Menma looked a bit interested. You know about Orochimaru. I will force you to reveal his location. Sasori looked emotionless. You can try. He attached all the chakra strings to the body of the second cage. It was proof of how complicated the puppet was that a master puppeteer such as Sasori would require all 10 of his fingers to control it. He spoke again, manipulating the puppet to open its mouth, revealing a tube. One of the most interesting things about human puppets is that they can use the abilities the ninja did in life. In this case, the puppetized body released a huge cloud of iron sand into the air, manipulating it with magnetic waves, the legendary iron sand of the second cage. What followed this declaration was an onslaught of waves and spikes of iron sand. The iron sand was a unique weapon in that it could crush, pierce, and bind its opponents. However, he already had experience with Gaara's sand and used the same tactics to dodge the spikes and large geometric rectangles as he searched for an opening. It was not until Sasori had the puppet to spread all the iron sand in spikes did he find an opening. He managed to avoid all of the spikes and dashed forward, smashing the puppet with a fierce palm thrust. Sasori seemed unconcerned with the loss of his best puppet and sighed, "It would be pointless to try any of my other human puppets against you." He unbuttoned his Akatsuki cloak and threw it off with a flourish, revealing his body to also be a human puppet. Chiyo looked horrified. "You went that far. You turned your entire body into a human puppet." The legendary Suna puppeteer seemed resolute as she unsealed a small scroll from her arm. "In that case, I am resolved to use these which I have sworn to never use again." She released the contents of the scroll and Menma was surprised to see 10 white puppets. All of the puppets were being controlled by one finger, the rumored highest point of mastery a puppeteer could achieve. Sasori finally looked a little bit interested in the technique, the legendary finger puppets of Chiyo. "It is rumored that you stormed an entire castle with that technique. However." He opened the part of his chest where his lungles would be and revealed a cloud of blue energy. He released a scroll on his back and what seemed like 100 puppets appeared in the air. He smirked a bit though, he had planned for something like this. Sasori smirked at the two and motioned his chakra for all the puppets to attack, but frowned when none of them moved to do so. He looked up and was shocked to see that all of his puppets were stuck on chakra strings. He looked to the sides of the cavern and was further surprised to see hundreds of spiders, each controlling a chakra string to make an interlocking web that captured all of his puppets in the air. He looked back at Menma to see him resting his palm on his heart, and knew he was defeated. He knew he was dead, so he decided to screw over his last teammate in his final moments. Orochimaru had betrayed him more than the Akatsuki, stealing the bodies of the first and second Hokage before he could turn them into puppets. He sighed. "You wanted information on Orochimaru, didn't you? I don't know if you want him or his new lapdog Sasuke, but I had planned to meet a spy in his ranks at the Tenshi Bridge, 10 days from now. Do what you will with the information." Menma nodded and released the gathered chakra in his palm, destroying Sasori's heart. Chiyo looked down in sadness at the fallen body of her grandson. "I wish there had been something I could have done to prevent this from happening. However, there is one more thing I must do. We need to find the others." Menma nodded and sealed the body of Sasori. There may be something they could learn from the Akatsuki from the corpse. They both left the cavern, hoping their teammates had defeated the other member of the Akatsuki. Shio and Kakashi vs. Deidara. Deidara flew overhead through a gorge as Shio and Kakashi jumped along spikes. Shio was repeatedly using her wind attacks to try and ground the Akatsuki member, but the clay construct proved very nimble in evading the tactics. Kakashi glanced at Shio. "Shio, I have a technique that will surely ground him, if not kill him directly, distract him as I prepare it." The blonde Uzumaki nodded and continued to keep up the pressure as Kakashi focused chakra into his Sharingan-I, transforming it into the Mangekyo version. It has surprised him that he had the Mangekyo 3 years ago. After his encounter with Itachi, he had tested it and found to his surprise that he had the Mangekyo as well. However, the chakra drain was so much that he could only keep it active for a few minutes. So he began to train heavily in the past 3 years and was now much stronger than before, and could keep the Mangekyo up for around an hour, plenty of time to use this technique. Soon a warp hole appeared on Deidara's torso. He exclaimed in shock at the technique. "Oi! What is this hum?" The hole continued, but Deidara was able to dodge at the last second and the hole absorbed his shoulder, completely detaching his remaining arm. The blonde grunted and failed to miss a wind cut that sliced through his bird, which fell to the ground. A clone of Shio's managed to catch the clay bird's head and opened it to reveal the corpse of Gaara. The clone looked furious and dispersed to inform her creator of the news. Shio felt more angry than she ever did at that moment. She glared at the Akatsuki member, unaware that her eyes were now glowing purple and her irises now slits. Her voice took a double-layered tone as she spoke menacingly. He just became Kazekage and you go and kill him. Finally accepted by everyone and you just take that away. I will kill you. Purple chakra condensed into spheres around her and they all launched at the armless Akatsuki member, creating a huge crater where each orb landed. Kakashi arrived at the scene and widened his eyes at the enraged Shio. He remembered Jiraiya's warning before the mission. Flashback. Jiraiya faced Minato and Kakashi seriously. I inspected the seal and it is true that the Kyuubi is now gone, however it seems something took its place. Minato looked confused. What replaced the Kyuubi? Jiraiya shook his head. I do not know, but when I tried to loosen the seal on the chakra so she could access it easier, it emerged. Shio became much crueler and gained power over these dark orbs. It took everything I had to seal it away again. The Toad Sage handed Kakashi a slip of paper with a seal on it. Use this if whatever is in the seal acts up again. Kakashi nodded and inspected the paper. He hoped he would not have to use this. Flashback end. He darted forward and stuck the seal to Shio's forehead, causing the purple tint in her eyes to recede and her normal blue to come back. Shio nodded, showing she was all right. Menma and Shio arrived to see the Akatsuki member eating his clay bird. Soon after Mito and Sakura arrived as well, surrounding Deidara. The mad bomber shouted at the gathered Konoha ninjas, "You will never catch me." Shio gasped. All of his chakra is gathering in his stomach, he is going to explode. Everyone dashed away and Deidara bulged out obscenely, exploding in a brilliant fireball. The fire would have reached the ninja but Kakashi saved them by absorbing the explosion into his wormhole. The silver-haired Jonin looked exhausted from using that move twice in one day. Forest clearing. They rested Gaara upon a bed of flowers and Shio began to cry. Why is it always Gaara? He just became Kazekage. Kakashi looked at his pupil sadly. Shio. Shio glared fiercely at her sensei, one eye glowing slightly purple. No sensei. This is not right. What right did they have to seal the Ikibi inside of him? None of this would have happened. Gaara would still be alive. His life wouldn't have been living hell. Shio looked on sadly as she rested upon her knees and a blue glow surrounded her hands, entering the fallen body of Gaara. Shio looked confused. What is she doing? I thought he was dead. Shio appeared to grow exhausted as she said her last words. I have made many mistakes in my life. With my grandson, my daughter, and this boy. I was the one to seal the Shukaku into Gaara. It is the mistakes of us old folks which hurt this generation the most. It is my duty to at least set one thing right. She turned to Shio and Menma. You too, you are a great hope to this war-torn world. You both shine with your own light, bringing hope to even a hopeless old lady like me. Treasure that light, for in the times ahead, we will surely need it. Lady Shio collapsed with her final words, the rest of the blue chakra entering Gaara, who twitched a bit and opened his eyes slowly, appearing shocked to have woken up at all. Shio rushed forward and hugged the recently revived Kazekage. Gaara. You're alive. Gaara seemed stunned by the hug. Shio. You saved me. Shio shook her head. No, Granny Shio did something that brought you back to life. But everyone came to support you. Gaara looked around and indeed, almost 100 Suna ninja, from Genin to Jonin were cheering happily from the sidelines at their safe and sound Kazekage. Gaara seemed speechless as they made their way back to Suna, knowing he had finally received the respect of his village since the Shukaku was sealed inside of him. 2 days later, the Konoha ninja stayed for Chio's funeral before preparing to leave. At the gates, Gaara himself came to send them off to say thank you to his rescuers. The ties between the leaf and sand would be greatly strengthened by this event. The departure ended with Shio shaking hands with the Kazekage, a memorable moment that would signify the beginning of a larger alliance between their two villages. The Konoha ninja waved and began to walk away in the direction back to Konoha. Each feeling celebratory that 2 of the Akatsuki had died. However, unknown to the Konoha or Suna ninja, is that a lollipop-masked man was flicking Sasori's ring up and down, giggling to himself as his plan progressed further. Chapter 23. The Turtle. The entirety of the Rookie 12 and their Jonin senseis, except Kakashi, stood in the Hokage's office. Minato sat in front of them with his hands clasped in front of his face. He looked at each ninja in the eye and spoke seriously. Everyone here, I am assigning a long-term mission. You all will be a part of a mission to take down the Akatsuki. You will be removed from the active roster to only take part in missions involving the Akatsuki. He paused to look for any doubt in their faces. Finding none, he continued, you will each be assorted into your original teams and assigned missions. For now I only have 2 missions, so I would like Team 9 and Team 7 to stay behind. The not mentioned teams nodded and left the room. Minato looked at the 2 teams and pulled out 2 scrolls, each labeled with an S rank. He gave one to Anko and the other to Shio. Team 9, your mission will be to go to the land of water and track down the Sanbi. It has been reported that it has been reformed. I do not wish to do this, but the only way to ensure that the Sanbi remains safe is to seal it within a Jinchuriki. Everyone in the room's eyes widened at this information. Shio looked angry. To-san. We cannot make another Jinchuriki. Minato closed his eyes and frowned. We have no choice, the Sanbi is a sitting duck. Completely exposed to the Akatsuki, and Kiri does not have enough sealing experience to seal it properly. All they would do is make another Gaara. Shio winced as she remembered the psychopathic boy that Gaara was before she and Menma helped him. Minato sighed again and handed a piece of paper to Anko. This seal is a weakened version of Shio's seal. It will be able to seal the Sanbi in an appropriate container. We have prepared an urn that will be used to seal the Sanbi. None of the people in the room looked happy, but they knew it was necessary. Minato then turned to Team 7 inches. Team 7, my mission for you is to hunt down the spy in Orochimaru's ranks that Sasori mentioned. Since Kakashi is still out of commission, I have requested a 3rd teammate and sensei for you. He turned to the rest of the teams. The rest of you will remain on standby until anything else comes up. Be prepared at a moment's notice. Everyone nodded and went about their duties. Village Gates, Team 9. Anko grinned at her 3 students. It's been a long time since we have teamed up together. I will enjoy this. Lee grinned his signature grin. Yosh. Despite the severity of the mission, it will also be a chance to reconnect among friends. Yakumo and Menma smiled as they began to run through the forest, heading to the land of water. Unknown to them, but other parties besides the Akatsuki were also interested in the Sanbi. Unkown Lake, land of water. The 4 members of Team 9 landed on the shore of the mist-covered lake after a week of travel. Anko observed the mist and spoke aloud. The mist is laced with chakra. It is too dense for human chakra, so the Sanbi must be producing it. It is reported that the 3 Tails is able to produce illusions through the use of water, so be alert. Menma closed his eyes and extending his chakra web around the lake, and felt the presence of the Sanbi. It took the form of a massive 3-tailed turtle at the bottom of the lake. It appeared to be asleep. He opened his eyes and turned to his team. The Biju is at the bottom of the lake. To seal it, we would need to get it to rise to the surface. Anko frowned. To get the Sanbi to rise, we would need a large disturbance in the lake. However, before anyone could react, a voice behind them spoke. That won't be necessary because we will be the ones to seal the Biju. The 4 Konoha ninja turned and saw 6 illegal sound ninja glaring at them. At the front of the group stood a woman with purple hair and a fur-collared coat. The second person was a tall and unimpressive-looking man with slicked-back brown hair. The third woman, thing was dressed in a full-body slime suit, leaving only his face uncovered. The fourth man was very short and had white hair with gray skin. The final man had white hair and had a gas mask over his mouth. Anko glared back at the sound ninja. You are a legal sound ninja, we will have to bring you in. The apparent leader of the group smirked and spoke. You can try, but you won't succeed. The woman turned to her team. Take care of them, I will bring Yakamura to seal the Sanbi. The 4 subordinates nodded and separated, each engaging on Konoha shinobi while the leader made her way with a young boy across the lake. Anko versus Renji. Anko smirked as she stood across from Renji. What her opponent did not know is that snakes were already burrowing underground to wrap around him. All she had to do was wait for them to bind him and then get one hand on the bastard to kill him. However, right before the snakes emerged from the ground, Renji jumped away. Anko narrowed her eyes as she began to throw shurikens and kunai at the poncho-wearing man. It should have been impossible to dodge that many snakes with no warning. He must be either a sensor or have other ways of sensing what cannot be seen. She observed the field and saw out of the corner of her eye a bat screeching in one of the trees. It was daytime, so the chances of a bat being in one of the trees was almost a null chance. She smirked and mentally commanded the snakes she had left in the woods to have a snack. Renji glared at the purple-haired Jonin. He knew she was once Orochimaru's favorite student. So if he killed her, it would give him a good chance of replacing Kabuto. He smirked a bit when he heard his bat's echolocation revealing the location of everything around him. He was about to put the Jonin under an echolocation illusion when he paused and spat out blood. He looked down and saw a kunai sticking out from his heart. He looked up at the smirking snake mistress as she dissolved into snakes, and appeared behind him. He managed to utter, how? Anko explained what she did, all the while smirking. You shouldn't leave your bats out in the open. All it took was a simple genjutsu to replicate the sound of bats while my snakes killed all the real bats. You relied so much on your bats that you left yourself open. Now die. She sliced off the man's head with her kunai. Kiho versus Lee. Lee faced the small man and grinned widely. Let us have a youthful battle, sound nin. Kiho muttered under his breath as he observed his opponent. What the hell is with this guy? He was about to raise his arm to fire his wrist launcher when he was suddenly knocked away by a fierce kick by Lee. The gray-skinned man flew back several feet before flipping to land on his feet, panting heavily from that kick. What the hell is that kid made of? His attacks hurt more than my missiles. He grunted as he was kicked away again, but this time in midair he fired his rocket at the green-clad ninja. Time seemed to slow as the rocket streaked towards Lee's face. However, at the last second before the rocket connected with his face, Lee disappeared and reappeared under the small man, and kicked him into the air. Lee disappeared once again and seemed to disappear as Kiho was battered in several directions before being drop-kicked back to the ground, breaking the ground beneath the white-haired rocket user, killing him instantly. Lee sighed as he stared at the corpse of his opponent. He hated killing, but he had no choice against a sound ninja. Every ninja that wore that headband had a kill on sight order by every country. He then began to follow the leader of their group, hoping to stop her before she concealed the Sanbi. Yakumo versus Gozu. Gozu glared at the bandana-wearing girl in front of him. She did not look like much with her simple looks, but he knew that he should never judge a shinobi by their looks. He decided to end this quickly. He strengthened his body with his earth techniques and dashed forward at greed speeds, punching a hole through the girl's body. He removed his fist with no remorse and began to walk away, only to pause as he felt an inch on his arm. He looked down and saw a slight bump on it. He frowned and scratched it, only for several other bumps to appear on his arm. He grew alarmed as lumps began to form all over his body and he felt bites beneath his skin. Soon some of the lumps burst and small spiders began to crawl out of them, eating him alive. This continued until his mind broke down from the trauma. The scene then fell apart in black sakura petals and revealed Yakumo standing above the foaming at the mouth Gozan. She took a knife and stabbed the man in the chest. She had learned much from Ibiki. He had taught her to always start off with the most traumatizing genjutsu before the enemy knows she specializes in genjutsu. They will assume she is using ninjutsu, and not attempt to counter a genjutsu. Before they could realize their mistake, their own brains would act against them and sink them in terror, removing all logical thought. She began to follow after the leader of their group, knowing she had to stop her before she sealed the Sanbi. Menma versus Narari and Kigiri. Menma sighed as he stared at the two ninja in front of him. He was annoyed that Orochimaru would send such low-level people to try and fight him. He glanced at the two and commented offhandedly, "I will make this quick." Both of the sound shinobi glared but widened their eyes as the leaf shinobi in front of them began to drip poison, each drop creating sizable holes that ate the earth. Once he was fully covered in poison, Menma dashed forward while muttering under his breath, "Doku no Yoroi." Narari tried to hit him, probably thinking his suit would protect him from the poison, however he was wrong as he cried out in pain. His suit was gradually turning purple as the poison infected him. Menma smirked and decided to explain his ability a bit. "That poison is composed of my most deadly venoms and my blood. It will slowly infect your blood until your entire body shuts down." He sniffed the air and looked at the other sound ninja in disdain. "Poison? You think poison will affect me?" Kigiri stiffed and began to back away, but Menma had enough of him. He disappeared and palm thrusted the man into oblivion. He sighed and deactivated his poison armor. He was about to continue on to their leader when he saw a pillar of chakra in the air and cursed. It seems they had already begun their awakening of the Biju. Middle of the lake. Yakamura screamed as all of his chakra was released to awaken the beast and diminish his chakra reserves to make room for the Biju chakra. Soon the lake began to grow choppy as the Sanbi stirred from its rest. Gurren smirked but frowned when she turned around and saw all 4 of the enemy Konoha shinobi. She grimaced. I thought those dimwits would have given us more time. Anko stepped forward. Surrender or die. You are a legal sound nin under the employment of an S-class criminal. Gurren growled at the insult to her master and formed 2 crystal-bladed tonfas on her arms. Never. You will have to kill me first. Anko smirked. Then we just have to kill you then. The 4 Konoha ninja were about to engage when they were all engulfed in crystal. Gurren smirked. Ha. Kill me. What a laugh. I can just crystallize the water and kill you instantly. However, Menma quickly broke through the crystal, and observed his teammates. Your crystal is strong, but I am able to send my chakra out in waves, disrupting their molecules and destroying it. Gurren frowned but slowly smirked. It doesn't matter. I can still just kill you here. Unless I die, the crystal surrounding your teammates won't be released. Menma got into his stance and spoke. Then I will not hold back. Gurren dashed towards him with her crystal-bladed tonfas. Menma quickly activated one of his new jutsu, Webbed Arena. Chakra strings flared around him and began to expand off his tenketsu points, connecting everywhere on the lake, forming a large interconnecting web around the 2 combatants. Gurren looked around in confusion. These strings are just chakra, how can they do anything? She cut one with one of her blades and was shocked when the blade stuck to the chakra and could not move. Menma smirked a bit. This is one of my best techniques. I can use chakra strings to create an arena around an area, giving it special effects. In this case, each string is highly condensed and only I am allowed to pass through them. Gurren growled and dismissed her tonfas. She would have to defeat him at long range then. She flashed through some hand seals and spoke loudly. In that case, take this. Jade Crystal Dragon. A large Japanese-style dragon erupted from the lake and broke through several strands of chakra. However, the dragon was tremendously slower than normal and Menma avoided it with ease. He decided to take it up a notch and released a shadow clone in the forest and entered Sage Mode Level 1. 4-bladed spider legs erupted from his back and his eyes turned red with slits. Gurren took a step back after seeing this form. It looked incredibly frightening to see it so suddenly. Menma smirked and jumped. The 4 spider legs attaching to the web as he moved quickly in the air. He went through 4 hand seals and his cheeks bulged as he thought. Neurotoxic shots. He spat shots of purple poison rapidly at the dodging woman. Gurren growled as she had to dodge the poison in a very limited area. She had already formed a crystal shield, but the poison seemed to eat right through it. She saw another coming from the senjutsu user and it barely touched her shoulder as she dodged. She winced as she felt the acid on her shoulder and quickly tried to wash it off in the lake. Unfortunately, this allowed Menma an opening to jump down from his web and pierced both her shoulders with his spider-like appendages. Gurren wordlessly screamed as she felt poison from the appendages course through her veins. As her vision faded, she felt sad that she would no longer be of use to Orochimaru, and that Yakamura would most likely die to the Konoha ninja. Menma sighed as he removed the appendages from the female's body. It saddened him that he had to end the last crystal user. He looked at the boy that Gurren had brought with her and sighed. What would he do with the child now? The boy looked at the corpse of his mother figure in shock until he began to hyperventilate, releasing all his chakra as he did so. Menma stumbled back from the force of the chakra and nearly ran into the uncrystallized teammates. Soon the entire lake grew stormy as the massive figure of the Sanbi rose from the depths. Anko turned to Menma. Quickly, the urn. We must use this opportunity to seal the Biju. Menma nodded and unsealed the urn, but was shocked when a giant wave came crashing down on them, forcing them all to dodge. The Biju seemed to be enraged from the child's chakra and was causing the lake to become extremely choppy. He was thrown around a bit by the water and gasped as he lost hold on the large urn, and it crashed upon the rocks, broken to pieces. Yakumo shouted above the rain. Damn it. What do we do now? Lee looked at his 3 teammates before steeling himself. Seal it in me. Menma quickly turned to his teammate. Are you crazy? We have no idea what sealing a biju into you could do. You could explode. Lee looked serious, or it can be contained in me. I have no chakra in my coils, only my core. The biju chakra will be able to rest easily into me. Anko observed her former genin critically and sighed. Alright, we have no other choice. She took out the seal and turned to her other genin. You will need to keep my safe during the sealing. If it is disrupted, anything could happen. Menma and Yakumo nodded and began to engage the sanbi. Menma went through hand seals and the blue chakra strings still around the lake expanded and began to weave around the three tails. Yakumo went through some hand seals and made several clones of them all around the lake, hopefully to distract the sanbi if it escaped from the web. Anko had already transferred the seal from the paper to Lee's stomach and was flashing through the required 100 hand seals, careful not to mess one up. Menma was sweating heavily. He had to keep his balance on the turbulent water but also keep fixing the strings keeping the sanbi in place. He may have large chakra reserves but this was draining him fast. He winced as one of the tails of the beast freed itself and slammed into one of the illusions that Yakumo placed around the lake. He quickly released more chakra strings to contain the tail. Yakumo was panting heavily as she repeatedly hammered the sanbi with calming illusions and replicas of their team. Anko flashed through the last 5 hand seals and shouted out as a blue dome enveloped nearly the entire lake, 8 trigrams divine seal. The sanbi roared once more before it seemed to break apart in the dome and enter the stomach of Lee, who was shaking in pain on the small boat that Gurren had brought with her. After nearly 10 minutes of held breaths, the chakra settled into Lee, who began to breathe easier. Menma quickly approached the downed Chunin and put a glowing green palm over his stomach. Menma closed his eyes as he saw all the problems with the Chunin scroll past his closed eyelids. He opened his eyes in shock. His chakra coils are fixed. Anko, who was panting from the ceiling, looked over in shock. What? Menma looked excitedly at his teammates. Lee's disease was that he could never expand his chakra coils, practically having coils of a newborn while his core continued to expand. However, with the influx of biju chakra traveling his veins to the seal, it forced them all open and his chakra is now circulating his body evenly. He will now be able to use jutsu. Yakumo smiled happily. Lee definitely deserves this. Anko picked up Lee on her back and turned to her genin. Alright, let's get back and report to the Hokage, and before any Akatsuki members show up. Everyone nodded and disappeared in body flickers. Konoha, 1 week later. Minato rubbed his forehead tiredly as he read the report. One mission, that's all he asked for. One mission where everything didn't go to hell for his former son's team. He looked at Lee, who looked quite healthy for just having a biju sealed into him. He had read the report where the urn had been broken. So they had sealed the biju into the green-clad genin, fixing his illness. He sighed heavily. You will all be paid the proper amount for the S-rank mission. Lee, for your sacrifice you will also earn the pay of another S-rank mission. I do not wish the information getting out that Lee is now a Jinchuriki. Lee, you may tell Guy, but no one else. I think he will be thrilled that you can now use chakra. Lee grinned widely and nodded. It felt strange knowing there was another being inside of him, but he would not let it hinder his life. He would live it to the fullest with the power of youth. Minato turned to the team. When the other team that I sent to gain information from Orochimaru returns, I will brief you again. Take this time to rest. You have earned it. Everyone nodded and left the office, feeling happy they managed to deny the Akatsuki one of the biju. Land of Water Lake. A blond man in a black cloak landed his bird on the shore and turned to his partner. It isn't here, him. A lollipop masked man shouted, but senpai. All the reports said it was here. Deidara frowned. I know Toby. Someone must have taken it before us, him. The now named Toby waved his arms excitedly. Who could have taken it before us? The feminine blonde growled. I don't know, but I'm betting it was either Orochimaru or those leaf brats who cut off my arms, him. Toby put an arm over his eye hole and began to cry. Wah. We were so close too. I wanted to make Leader Sama proud. Deidara deadpanned at his partner. How the hell did he get accepted into the Akatsuki again, him? Unknown to the blonde, however, Toby had activated his Mangekyo Sharingan behind his arm and was looking around the lake. I feel chakra from those leaf shinobi here. They must have sealed the three tails. I will have Zetsu observe them for now and find the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi. Deidara made two large birds from his clay and turned to Toby. Come on, we must report this to leader Samahim. Toby saluted. Yes, senpai. They flew off to inform the leader of the Akatsuki of the new development. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.